2019. Good evening, I'm Alice North, the Mayor.
James Nikita, City Commissioner. Commission President.
May West City Commissioner.
Rocky Smith, Commissioner.
Please stand and join me in the flag salute.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Pleasure this evening to welcome Cub Scout Pack 460. Welcome. They've taken a tour of City Hall. I believe you're earning your citizenship badge. Is that right? Great. Glad to have you here. What was that?
470.
470? Oh, I got the number wrong. Okay, sorry about that. And I should have done, but I had a very special envelope that I was going to present to the community tonight, and the return address is from the White House. So, tell me who signed it, Cub Scouts? Who? Shout it out. Michelle Obama, the First Lady. So this is a letter to the citizens of Oregon City. Dated February 2nd. Dear citizens of Oregon City, congratulations on your designation as a Preserve America community. And thank you for all that you do to enhance our nation's heritage. Your community holds a treasured place in the American story, and it is through your vision and dedication that our history will be upheld and our future will be renewed. President Obama and I are proud of your community, and we applaud your achievement. The Americans who came before us built this country on the strength of their hopes, hard work, and perseverance. Now you are using those same qualities to help share our history with today's Americans and those of tomorrow. By strengthening your community, you are strengthening our country. You are showing that each of us has a role to play in shaping a better future, and we can do it by honoring our past. Thank you for all that you do, for your continuing commitment to our nation's heritage, and for your enthusiastic participation in the Preserve America program. I wish you all the best, and I have high hopes for your continued success. Sincerely, Michelle Obama. This is actually a very special designation. We are one of only 6 communities in the state of Oregon to be so designated as a Preserve America community. It also sets us in line for possible grants to help us use our unique heritage and unique strengths in the community to assist with revitalization and economic development. And in fact, let's see, we had got this on a Tuesday, and by Thursday, Lloyd Purdy had written a grant already this week because it was due on Friday for some funds that we hope are available. On the downside is the fact that we've just received word that the Preserve America funds are being cut on the national level, so we have a little battle to go to make sure that those funds remain and that we're able to use those for projects within Oregon City. But thank you to Lloyd Purdy for getting the application together and for again writing the grant. So we hope it's successful. Thank you very much. Moving along into citizen comments. Do we have? I believe we do have citizen. We don't have any questions. Okay. When you come up later to speak on an agenda item, we ask that you come to the microphone, state your name and the city in which you live. You do not need to give us your address if you've written legibly. And then you'll see on the clock here, you can self-monitor that you have up to 3 minutes to talk to us about or to give your views on your particular agenda item. So we'll move in then to looking at the agenda. Is there any agenda item that anyone needs reordered or pulled off the consent agenda? So now we'll take the agenda in the order in which it is adopted.
We're going to add 7D.
We do need to add one to the agenda. We need to approve a contract or discuss the contract for the end of the Oregon Trail Interpretive Center consultant. So that will be the last of the business agenda. Mr. Smith.
Minutes from February 3rd.
We'll consider the minutes from February 3rd separately. All right, we'll then move into our first public hearing. And that is a resolution to consider annexation of approximately 54 acres to the city of Oregon City. This is an area in the Park Place concept plan area and within our urban growth boundary. Okay, thank you. The procedures that we will go through in consideration of this item are outlined in Oregon statutes as well as city codes. So I'll ask our attorney at this point to walk us through the legalities that are necessary for this before we continue this as a quasi-judicial hearing.
Thank you, Mayor Norris.
Goodbye.
And let me find the appropriate page for it. The applicable criteria, this is as Mayor Norris indicated, this is a quasi-judicial land use decision for a annexation. The staff has prepared a staff report that lists the applicable criteria, and that those criteria are available for you to review in the staff report. All testimony, argument, and evidence should be directed toward those criteria or other criteria in the plan or land use regulations that you believe apply. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the city commission and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue will preclude an appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals on that matter. And failure of the applicant to raise constitutional issues regarding any condition of approval will waive the ability to seek damages in circuit court. With that, I'd ask if the commission has any bias, ex parte contacts, or conflicts of interest that they would like to declare.
Ms. Nita?
I have ex parte contacts to declare. Early on, several weeks ago, when this project was, the community was becoming aware that this project, annexation application would be submitted to us. I was CC'd on some emails that were sent amongst some of the appointments in the Park Place Neighborhood Association, and basically early on they said, you know, they plan to oppose it again, and I was perhaps wisely left off anything, so I wouldn't have a bias found there for, you know, a significant ex parte. But the information, and I can't even remember the substance of the emails, has gone into the way I view this application.
Yes. We have a written testimony from a person who couldn't be here, and that'll be right into the record. That person spoke to me prior to the commission meeting. It was in the general context of what's actually in this testimony that she has submitted.
Mr. Smith?
I had a conversation at the end of our last commission meeting, just briefly in the parking lot with Mr. Ziegler, but I don't think that it contained anything that would conflict my ability.
Challenges to any member of the commission to hear this matter? Seeing none, proceed with the hearing.
Okay, thank you. The hearing, procedure for the hearing will be that we will have the staff report. Following that, we will open the public hearing, and the applicant will have an opportunity to address the commission for 15 minutes. Then we'll take public testimony, pro and con, followed by rebuttal by the applicant, and then the commission will consider our resolution on the issue. And so to begin the staff report, Mr. Conkle. Tony?
Madam Mayor and Commissioners, I'll be on staff report tonight for the requested annexation of approximately 53 acres consisting of 8 properties up in the Park Place Neighborhood Association's area. These properties were part of the Park Place concept planning process that we did go through a few years back. I would like to enter into the record tonight, and I believe that 3 of these have already been uploaded to your systems on the dais. And that includes a memorandum from Mr. Lewis from our Public Works Department dated February 17th, 2010. I believe it'll be the 3rd from the last exhibit on your exhibits that have been provided. The second is, and I believe this got uploaded backwards on yours, but I'll own the Black and Beach January 29th, 2010 Livesey Road Pump Station Evaluation Report, and then the draft minute from the February 2010 Planning Commission meeting. I believe all 3 of those have been uploaded to your stations. And then, as Commissioner Neely pointed out, we did just receive testimony from Ms. Walters, our Park Place resident. Her testimony is dated February 17th, 2010, and I'd like to enter that in the record as well. I also went through it, the letter that she submitted. She represented the Park Place Neighborhood Association. They have real concerns about the ability to provide urban services such as parks, sidewalk, public transportation in the area. Identifies the costs for capital expenditures required for transportation infrastructure that were identified in the Park Place concept plan. She noted the approval criteria as the orderly economic provisions of services for these annexations. And she points out that she believes there's an inadequate acreage of parks in the Park Place Neighborhood Association area. They do not concur with the staff report that their existing infrastructure is sufficient and can be made sufficient to serve the needs of the annexation area. And they don't believe that the approval criteria have been met. It's just a brief summary. Certainly have the ability to read that as we're going through the hearing tonight. The applicant proposed to annex 53 acres located in the Park Place Neighborhood Association area. The properties are zoned medium density residential, which would have a zoning designation of R5 per the Oregon City Municipal Code. When we're entering the Park Place concept plan, one of the requirements is that we comply with the transportation planning rule, the TPR. And what that means is that you need to analyze the transportation impacts at year 1 as year as well 20, and demonstrate that the level of service standards for that facility, whether it be a local facility or a state facility, in most of these cases, operates sufficiently. And when we did the adoption of the Park Place concept plan and the implementing ordinances that were adopted into the code to implement that concept plan, we deferred compliance with the transportation planning rule until annexation and rezoning of the properties in that concept plan area. So you'll be seeing tonight is something unique that we haven't done before in the past, where we're proposing to annex the properties in with the county designation. And if it makes it out of the commission tonight and does go to a vote of the citizens on May 18th, and the citizens do approve it, all we're going to be doing will be annexing 8 properties with their existing FU10 or rural residential farm and forest 5-acre minimum. At a later date, the property owners will be required to come in and go through the zone change necessary to implement the city zoning on those properties. And at that point, as part of the zone change or a comprehensive plan amendment, you are required to show TPR compliance. So at that point, we would be doing the full-blown analysis over the 20-year planning horizon for the rezoning of those properties. What that does mean is that if these properties are annexed, they will not be considered urbanizable to city standards because they will not have a city zoning. And they will need to come in and address the transportation planning rule to demonstrate adequate infrastructure when they come and make that change. And that zone change would be required to go before the Planning Commission as well as the City Commission for approval. And there are pros and cons to this. The pros are, from the standpoint of future citizens, property owners, the upfront costs of preparing some of these documents and plans and studies is large and significant. If those are required before a vote, of which they're not sure what the outcome is, that's a pretty big burden to put on a property owner. It can certainly be done. There's nothing wrong with that. You could require that. But if you're looking at this as we did the UGB expansion and we looked from way up and kind of looked down and said, okay, we need to provide some housing, commercial, industrial in this region, and we started to identify properties. And then we focused in a little bit closer and we started doing concept plans. And in the concept plan, we identified all of the infrastructure improvements that are necessary to serve this proposed area. Out of that concept plan, we adopted zoning ordinances that implemented that concept plan. They are in place right now. We updated our system development charges to reflect all of the transportation improvement costs that are necessary to serve this development, and those are adopted and in place right now. They've been prorated, as you may recall, because of the downturn in the economy, and they are to go into effect, full effect. Off the top of my head, I believe it's within a year that the full SDC fees for transportation will be charged. So as we get closer and closer, we start to get all of our policies, goals, and ordinances in place. So now we're at the step of trying to bring in properties to start implementing those concept plans that have been approved and those ordinances that implement those concept plans. So in this case, the next step would be to annex the property. Once the annexation is successful, if it is, they come back in and do a zone change. At that point, they could apply for a subdivision to run concurrently with that, or they could just do a zone change, get the property zoned to a city zoning designation, and then come back in at a later date. So I think it's just important to note that there's been a lot of work that has gone into analyzing these areas, and that a lot of precautions and addressing the issues that have been raised by the public as we've gone through this process has started to occur. Now, additional ones may be necessary as we move through this process and we identify these infrastructure improvements that are needed as you get down to site specific, down to the 50-acre or the 100-acre size. But I guess just stressing the fact that what the proposal is right now is 53 acres with 8 tax lots and 5 homes. And that will be the impact on the infrastructure that you will see if that annexation is approved until such later date as a zone change is requested. Flip to the PowerPoint. The second slide that I provided is the Park Place concept planning area, which was adopted and put into code. And then the next one, it shows the requested annexation site as part of where it sits in the Park Place concept plan. So what you can see on the screen highlighted in red are the boundaries of the proposed annexation area. And so what is being proposed right now in these 53 acres is all residential. We're not getting any commercial or retail as part of this. Is not included in this boundary. And obviously we don't obviously have the connection completely from Holcomb Boulevard down to Redland Road that's identified in that concept plan, but it does provide a beginning to that key north-south infrastructure road improvement that was identified. As we look through the city municipal code, the objective that's been charged to the city commission is that when we propose annexation, the commission should consider the following factors as relevant. And the first one is adequacy of access to the site. The property has several local street signs as well as access to Holcomb Boulevard to provide access into the area. Conforming the proposal with the city's comprehensive plan. Chapter 14 of the Ordinance of Municipal Code talks about annexations, trying to avoid the creation of county islands, avoiding cherry stems, long linear extensions to do annexations. I would point out that 3 of the properties along Holcomb Boulevard did not sign the petition or not sign yes or no, either in favor or against the request. We have included them in this annexation request to avoid creating a county island. we did have two of the property owners come in and talk at the planning commission hearing. I did meet with the Townsends. They came to our offices and we discussed some of the questions they had. They did not leave their or for or against, and we have not heard back from them since. But all of those property owners, specifically the ones who did not sign the petition, we did notify at least 3 times with public notices, as well as mailing them the staff reports of when the staff report and when the hearings would be, just to make sure that they were informed of this hearing before the planning commission as well as tonight. Additionally, as part of the comprehensive plan, we adopted the Park Place concept plan, goals and objectives, and it talks about providing the orderly annexation of properties, specifically those that are adjacent to or near the existing city limits, which is what you have in this situation, where you have several street stubs with utilities, including water, sanitary, sewer, and storm, stub adjacent directly into these sites. This is a logical extension of services, as well as bringing lands into the urban growth boundary. The adequacy and availability of public facilities and services to serve potential development. As part of the Park Place concept plan, and as I was discussing earlier, we went through and identified what the infrastructure impacts would be. We identified and focused a majority of that work on the transportation system, because that tends to be one of the most expensive improvements to make as you go through this process. All of the transportation improvements necessary to serve this area were identified. And as I stated earlier, those costs were included in our SDC fees to construct those. We also looked at providing water in the area, sanitary sewer, how we would be providing stormwater management, as well as resource protection, habitat protection. We revised the steep slopes code to address the concerns that have been raised. So, are the services available right now to serve it? No. But this is one of the incremental steps you take to identifying what improvements to the infrastructure need to be brought in to serve these 53 acres, and that would be done at the zone change process. That's where you start looking at what improvements to the transportation system do we need to provide today to meet the demands for this 53 acres at that time. Compliance with applicable sections of Oregon Revised Statutes, Chapter 222 and Metro Code 309. Throughout the staff report, we did walk through the Metro approval criteria. ORS 222 talks about being contiguous to city limits. This property is contiguous to city limits for approximately 3,500 linear feet. It meets the requirements as identified. Natural hazards identified by the city, such as wetlands, floodplains, and steep slopes. We did update our codes to implement, as I stated earlier, additional language and requirements for steep slope development. We have the new Natural Resource Overlay District, which complies with not only Title III from Metro, but Title 13, which is Nature in the Neighborhoods. Those codes exist, are on the books, have been identified where those areas are in these concept plan areas, and would be applied if these properties were annexed into the city. Any significant adverse impacts on specially designated open space, scenic, historical, and natural resource areas by urbanization at the time of annexation. We do not have in our comprehensive plan scenic areas, natural open spaces that have identified. The concept plan did identify park spaces, linear connectivity, and those have been codified and would be implemented when development is proposed. There are no historical resources identified on the property. Lack of any significant adverse effects on the economic, social, and physical environment of the community by the overall impact of annexation. The impact of this annexation is, once again, 5 homes, 53 acres, and 8 lots. And this is where this is a little different from what we've been doing before. When we've had properties that have been in the city since the 80s, when we did our last expansions, those properties had comprehensive plan designations that had been in place. And what we've historically done is said, you've had a comp plan designation, here's the zoning that goes with it. If you're annexed, you get the zoning.
because we did these concept plans in these UGB expansion areas, some of those infrastructure requirements have been delayed to the zoning of the properties. So this is one reason you're seeing this coming in a little bit different than what you historically have. The city commission shall only set for election annexations consistent with the positive balance of the factors we've just gone through. So these are the 7 factors we use to consider an annexation, and we need to determine if they're consistent with a positive balance of these factors. Staff brought this before the planning commission. They held 2 hearings on it. We worked with Clackamas River Water to address some wording concerns that they had. We have what's called a Holcomb Outlook Park Place agreement with Clackamas River Water, to the HOP agreement, as to who will provide services and when those services are transferred from Clackamas River Water to Oregon City. We do have letters in the record from CRW indicating they are happy with the new language that was added, as well as the identification of the tax lots that would transfer, would stay with CRW, and would be transferred at a later date upon development. As I stated, we are recommending, and the Planning Commission did unanimously recommend to you tonight for your consideration, that this annexation be sent to the voters for the May 18th, 2010 ballot. That the properties be withdrawn from Clackamas County Enhanced Law Enforcement District. That if annexation is successful, we concur with Tri-City for addition of these properties to the Tri-City Service District. Remains in Clackamas County Fire District 1 as we're the provider. We've identified the tax lots that are to remain in Clackamas River Water District until such time as transfer is required for the HOP agreement. Withdraw one of the tax lots right now if annexation is successful, and provide it with Oregon City Water Service. Accept the applicant's fleet's funding fee proposal, and the annexed properties will maintain the existing county zoning designation if approved by the citizens of Oregon City, and that demonstration at time of rezoning with compliance with the transportation planning rule, as well as all other infrastructure requirements that you would need to do for a rezoning of a property, shall be met at a later date. Before I conclude, I'd like to have John Lewis from our Public Works Department come up to address the Black and Beach letter that was entered into the record tonight, as well as his letter. What you're probably going to hear tonight is some concerns about the existing the old Park Place Water District water pumping facility that we took over, that the city took over and maintains. So I'll turn that over to John to go ahead and discuss a little bit.
Madam Mayor and Commissioners, there's, from my understanding, yes, it was Park Place Water District that originally provided water service to this area. So there's a water line in Livesey Road that extends pretty much to the east end of Livesey Road, and at the end of that there's a pump station. And it's a small pump station. It's a booster pump station that serves 4 homes, most of which are up at a higher elevation than everything else on Livesey Road. So that pump station there is to provide adequate pressure to those homes, because the water line in Livesey Road doesn't do that on its own. We have struggled over the years to, with the pump station is really a 7.5 horsepower pump station. There are some pictures of that pump station in the materials that Tony referred to earlier that's uploaded. And to me, it's more like an irrigation pump house. It's fairly small. It's probably got 12 by 15 footprint, the building itself. And so we struggled with that off and on. When we lose power in that area, we lose, that pump station also loses power. And when that happens, those property owners have less water pressure or no water pressure, depending on how high they are on the hill. It's been like that for a long time. I'm not sure how long Park Place has been in there, but it's got quite a bit of history associated with it. And over the last couple of years, we've struggled with pumps, and it sounds like, based on the findings of this engineering analysis that Black and Beach completed for us, that we've been installing pumps that are inadequately sized for that purpose. So I will refer to the Black and Beach report, was submitted on January 29th to Nancy Crush Hour. Public Works asked Black and Beach to do an analysis of the pump, and the initial analysis was really recommended, had some replacement options and had some upgrade options, and we asked them to include with that an idea of a gravity option, both temporary and permanent. So the idea behind the gravity option would be to eliminate that pump station and serve it from the higher pressure zone, which is up near Holton Boulevard, and serve, at least temporarily, those 4 homes, and that would allow us to abandon that pump station. So on page 10 of 23, if you can get to that, I see it on both.
It's the last attachment under this agenda item. It doesn't have a name next to it.
On page 10, it's in the appendix, but it was my favorite section. It's got summary of phase 1 findings at the bottom of that page. I'll just read it to you. The overall condition rating of the Livesey Road pump station is average. Pump station requires some improvements in order to improve performance and efficiency. Pump station structure itself is in good condition. Although it lacks HVAC systems or ventilation, which cause moisture and buildup, slipping hazards and corrosion of the electrical equipment, and deficiencies of the pump and the motor. The pump and the motor are incorrectly sized to meet the required service capacity of the pump station. Pump station contents currently operates with 1 pump. Having 2 pumps installed would provide backup in case of failure. There's some cost alternatives in this study that range in price from a new pump station, which built to a standard that this particular engineer would back up would be quite high, to doing some upgrades, which would be a lesser standard, but still really kind of meet the standard of that system and how it's existed. So I guess our feeling is this has been suggested that this alone is a reason for considering this annexation emergency, and while we feel like the pump station has some deficiencies, we're definitely not considering an emergency. The 4 homes don't have fire service, have not had fire service. We provide, even with this pump station, we provide water service to their meters down on Livesey Road, and then they have private meter lines that run, private water services that run all the way up to their homes. So the longest one's probably 1,500 feet long, but there's one fire hydrant down on Livesey Road. I would say it's probably not where we'd want to be if we had a large house fire to serve that area, but that's the way that area's been served for a long time. That's it.
So we bring this up, and that you're probably going to hear some testimony tonight about, this constitutes an emergency, and that we should do an emergency annexation and add properties. I think 2 things. One, there's still a process to go through for an emergency annexation. We just don't add properties or make that decision at a hearing we would tonight. And the second issue is still goes to a vote of the citizens per our charter. And I would also point out the property owners, the Public Works Department tried to take a proactive approach to approaching the property owners to try and remedy a situation that they have historically had for a pump station and water system that we took over when we took over Park Place area. There are remedies other than annexation. They currently have Oregon City services outside of the city limits. One of the proposals was to provide us an easement to put in a gravity water line to serve those 4 homes. And one of the responses was, well, we should be annexed then before we'll give you an easement. So there are other remedies. As John's discussed, we can work with the existing facility, but I just want to stress that we don't believe that this constitutes an emergency per the Oregon Revised Statute, nor what our own report actually said and was presented to the property owners for the Planning Commission meeting last week. With that, I will conclude our presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay. First, I would like to take the liberty of the chair and declare that the pronunciation of the road will be Livesey throughout the proceedings. And then I'll call Commissioner West, I believe, who wanted to ask a question.
Tony, when you were explaining that the process has changed, so tonight we're considering an annexation, then down the road will come a zone change, perhaps will come a zone change and a sublot or a subdivision partition or application, perhaps. But right tonight we're just going for the annexation. So what has changed the process? Because this was in a concept plan area. What was that? Is that what you were saying?
So, in 2002, when we expanded our urban growth boundary, that was one of the first times we've expanded the urban growth boundary of Oregon City in a long time. So those everything else that was prior to that urban growth boundary expansion had been in the city's urban growth boundary and has historically had a comprehensive plan designation. And we updated our transportation system plan in 2001, and we accounted for all those lands inside our urban growth boundary in identifying what improvements are needed to our transportation system. So now we've added these new areas, so they needed a brand new look, and they need to be incorporated into our existing documents and infrastructure plans. And so we've done a great deal of that work. We've identified projects, we've identified costs, we've updated system development charges not only for transportation but other infrastructure. But then the last step is that compliance with the transportation planning rule, which is not only the day one something happens, but day 20 or year 20 as well. So that was delayed, and that needs to occur at some point in this process. So that's why historically, this is why this is being treated differently than those in the past.
Mr. Neely.
A couple of questions. One is you had indicated the three parcels adjacent to Holcomb Road did not go for or against this particular annexation request, but it is part of the proposed annexation. This is part of what we used to call a double majority.
Well, in this case,
yes. What's the third one? 50% property owners, 50% residents, right?
Well, actually, in this case, it's land value, property owners, property size. So they have 93% of the acreage, 57% of the owners, and 61% of the assessed value is the triple majority.
Well, I appreciate the map with the juxtaposition of these against the areas that in the concept plan were shown as mixed use and higher density areas that were there. They seem to abut to where those are on the concept plan. What are comments, these are coming in, if they are zoned out, zoned in at R5. And when it comes to dealing with the infrastructure, and specifically thinking of the transportation system, what is necessary to serve, I presume, R5 residents is not necessarily what's necessary to serve somebody that has commercial properties and so forth. Should this annexation come in and development occurs before the areas that are mixed use come in, is it possible to condition any transportation systems coming through this area so that they actually can serve areas that were mixed use and higher density?
In the park-based concept planning process, they did identify a hierarchy of road system to adequately serve the retail, the commercial, as well as the higher density residential. So the need for the arterials has been identified in the concept plan and would be required as part of that main north-south connection between Redland Road and Holcomb Boulevard. So even though you're correct, we might come in with a smaller subdivision application on, say, 10 acres, but the main north-south road is on there, we would certainly have them build that to serve the area, not a local road that only serves their 10 acres.
Other questions before we open the public hearing? Seeing none, I will open the public hearing. Did you? No. Oh, I missed.
I just put them on there. Okay, so my question is regarding police service. The $3,500 per dwelling unit is per dwelling unit, whatever comes in the future, not the 5 existing dwelling units, correct?
They're just added to our existing tax rolls.
So $3,500 is for the
Every new home that's built.
okay.
It's collected at time of building permit.
And how is that $3,500 determined? I mean, where did that number come from? Is it just a random? Does it have any connection to actually what services are being provided, or any, or is it just a random number?
This started coming up when we had Chief Harris. We're trying to deal with how do we address some of the freeze onto the tax roll.
Well, my understanding of it, and that's actually from a conversation with Chief Harris before he retired. My understanding of it is that $3,500 essentially is to provide police service during construction until the property is finished, correct?
Added to the tax roll,
Right.
correct?
Okay.
Because even when that home's brought on, it usually lags a little bit till the values get in.
Okay. But this is something that I'm assuming our current police chief signed off on, right?
We had a discussion about it. Yes.
All right, thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Neely.
There's a question going back to that. There's nothing in our code that actually requires this payment, is there? Or has the code been updated?
Optional.
It's optional, however, it's something that sweetens the pot, I presume, but it is optional.
It is only applies to property owners that signed the consent petition to be a part of this. So, for example, the 3 homes on Holcomb Boulevard that did not sign the petition, this would not apply to.
Questions about this? Okay, Mr. Bison.
Mayor, I did want to follow up on something that Tony had indicated in terms of the building the arterial through a smaller subdivision. There are some constitutional limitations on what we can require the property owner to pay. Typically, when we have a situation like that where somebody has to build a road or a water line larger than is necessary to build their property, the Dolan case prevents us from exacting more than what's roughly proportional. So typically when we do that, the city will enter into an agreement with the property owner where the city pays for that portion that's greater than what would serve the particular property owner. There are ways to recover those costs through a reimbursement district or other options. But we may well condition it to provide the arterial, but the city would end up shouldering some of those upfront costs.
That'd be through it's Bill saying a reimbursement district or SDC credit. I mean, there's multiple options for providing for the oversizing of infrastructure. And I guess I just point out one other thing was that the police fee does have a sunset of 10 years on that as well, just to make you aware of that.
Commissioner Neely.
We had examples, and I know the South End sewer line is one of them, where in fact the developer that put in the line was reimbursed by subsequent property owners. Is that the case? And it's still something that we're actually doing, actually.
Correct.
So if the city need not necessarily front the cost, depending on what can be arranged into as the infrastructure comes in.
Correct. It
Yeah,
can
well,
be
that
done in a number of
reimbursement,
ways.
district. Okay, let's move into the public hearing then. We'll have a chance to continue to ask questions later. For the public hearing, I assume you represent the applicants.
Good evening, Mayor and City Commissioners for the City of Oregon City. My name is Kirsten Van Loo. I work in Beaverton, Oregon. I live in rural, unincorporated Washington County. And I'm here tonight representing the application Park Place partners, including Kent and Ron Ziegler, who have made application for annexation of the properties that you see outlined so beautifully in red, for annexation into the city of Oregon City. Staff kind of stole my thunder and made the majority of my presentation for me. But I'm going to elaborate a little bit because I can do it better than he can, actually.
I just wanted to add, just because you're allotted 15 minutes doesn't mean you need to take it all.
Oh, I promise you, I will finish in 12:30, I promise you. Well, he heard me make a presentation a couple weeks ago about how when we do land use planning, we start at 30,000 feet. So we start from 30,000 feet in the air and we take a look at the big picture. And then we slowly zoom our camera lens in more tightly and more tightly and more tightly onto the area that we're working on. And as he put fairly eloquently, we are at the point of zooming in with our telephoto lens to the area that was planned very, very well through your Park Place concept plan. The land was brought inside to the urban growth boundary, and the city of Oregon City went through a massive, long, grueling process to develop a Park Place concept plan and implement it. And the first time that this property was put forth for annexation, the annexation failed. That was prior to the adoption of the Park Place concept plan. Now we have a plan in place that has endured an extensive public process, a public review process, and has been adopted by the citizens, and it has been codified. As Tony has said, we now have a plan in place that tells us where we want to go, gives us very good guidelines on this very large piece of property. The annexation that's before you tonight is a very small portion of that. So what we have here tonight is a very simple land use process. I have with me tonight both Ken and Ron Ziegler. I have a civil engineer here with me tonight, and you have in your packets that you may or may not have read fairly extensive traffic analysis. That traffic analysis is not a 20-year look at the transportation planning rule requirements. It is the beginning of that transportation planning rule requirement, which will require many more pages and a lot more analysis and some broader long-range conclusions. But it did lead us to understand where we might have problems. It helped initiate a conversation with ODOT. We've had meetings with ODOT to identify areas within the city that may have problems on a collector and arterial basis. And it helped us to work with your city traffic engineer to establish some proportionate share costs and some funding mechanisms for future transportation issues. This is an application strictly for annexation into the city. As Tony mentioned, we are not asking for a zone change. We're not asking for a comp plan amendment. We're not asking for any kind of a development approval. We want to build the necessary base layer, our foundation, to move forward over the next 6 months, 8 months, year, 2 years, to subsequently, if our annexation is successful, do the necessary comp plan amendment and zone change analysis work, submit that application to the city for review and approval, and then move in with incremental subdivision applications throughout the property, working probably from north to south, because we have infrastructure, we have transportation infrastructure and stormwater sewer and storm sanitary and water infrastructure available in both Holcomb Boulevard and the subdivisions just south of Holcomb Boulevard. This will be the first step, and a most critical first step, to enable us to begin to develop north-south transportation, pedestrian and vehicular transportation corridors that you have on the Park Place concept plan. Until we get this land annexed in, specifically our piece to the northeast, we don't have a methodology to begin to build some type of a north-south pedestrian and vehicular connection down to Redland Road. I know that all of you are familiar with the Park Place concept plan, and you know that that extension of Holly from Redland up to Holcomb is a major, important spine that is very necessary in Oregon City to alleviate some of the traffic congestion and some of the trips that take place on Highway 213. And as we incrementally develop, slowly and steadily and surely, we will be able to build that spine to create north-south connections on the east side of your city. This application is not an application for a zone change. We know that we have to do an additional traffic analysis for the 20-year look to meet the state transportation planning rule requirements. We know that there is significant infrastructure analysis that needs to be done with the 200 zoom lens. Right now we're looking at this with the 100 zoom, and we know that after annexation is successful, we will need to zoom in and look much more closely on the very specific infrastructure needs to serve this property. Based on the economic situation that we have here in Oregon relative to development, and based on the cost of the studies that would need to be done to solve the infrastructure design problems, it didn't make sense to do those studies prior to getting our first consent from our citizens that annexation is appropriate at this time. So we know that that is necessary to get the best design solutions. There's no development application in front of you today. It's not a request for any particular street pattern. The pattern that you see up on the map and the pattern, which is exactly the same as the pattern that we have over on our map over here, is the concept plan map, which was a very general, you'll notice it's drawn very soft, there's no hard lines, there's no engineering drawings, a very soft concept methodology to demonstrate that vehicular patterns were feasible or practicable. It's not a request for any type of housing. We're not talking about single family or multifamily or detached or attached, just to bring the land into the city. And we're not asking for any changes to the physical complexion that we have today. 5 houses on 53 acres, a total of 8 tax lots. Absolutely nothing will change on the physical makeup of the land before versus after annexation. Why do we want annexation? We need to prepare for a housing demand. Today we think that, my goodness, we have more houses available and we have houses going through foreclosure, but what we know, those of us who have gray hairs and have been in this business for a long time, is that for every valley we have with not much housing demand, we will see in the next 3 to 5 to 7 years a housing peak, and we will see our fortunes turn for the better, we hope, and we hope sooner rather than later, and we will see a demand for housing and affordable housing in the next 3 to 5 years. We want to do this to implement a plan that has already had many hours of effort put into it. It's already been adopted by the city. It's the appropriate place to annex because all of the planning work has been done. We want to build ground level support for future development. We want to begin the process for constructing necessary vehicular and pedestrian connectivity, and we want to begin the process for constructing necessary infrastructure. You heard your public works manager talk about the fact that we do have a failing water system in the area, and while providing water to only 4 houses may or may not constitute an emergency, any of you who have been without water for 2 or 3 days would definitely consider an emergency. It's not necessarily a justification for emergency annexation, but it is appropriate to consider what is the correct long-term best solution. If this land were annexed into the city and was inside the city, we could begin to do long-term design, infrastructure designs that would potentially alleviate the small problem we have with the water district now and allow us to put in a permanent system that would be a one-time fix versus a Band-Aid that might have to be replaced over time. Our concept plan embodies 3 core values. Those core values are environment, community design, and transportation. These core values will be addressed through a comprehensive development review of each phase. We aren't addressing them today in any great detail because we're not proposing any development. We're not even proposing a zone change at this time. But without annexation of the property into the city, no review or evaluation for compliance with these 3 core values can take place. The application is a request to be given an opportunity to implement the core values. We have to get an annexation done first before we can take that next step to do our transportation planning rule analysis, to do our infrastructure analysis, to begin to design permanent water facilities, permanent sewer facilities, and actually even some permanent storm drainage facilities, because we have some storm drainage that's kind of interesting right now in the southern part of the existing developed subdivision, where the water essentially flows overland over part of the site that we're proposing for annexation. So I ask you to please consider this a very important first step. It's a baby step in the world of land development. I've made presentations to this commission before where I have presented large subdivisions, and we've gone gung-ho with annexations and zone changes and comp plan amendments and subdivisions all in one giant package. And that was then, and this is now. And at this point in our economic cycle, what we're looking for is small, positive, appropriate incremental steps. We believe the annexation of this land is the appropriate step, and now is the right time to get started, to give us a chance to do a well-considered design so that 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years from now, we actually will see houses being built and roads being built, and we'll be able to implement the plan that you adopted. And I'm done in 11 minutes and 35 seconds. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions of the applicant? Okay, thank you. Now we need to move into speakers. Do you have the list of speakers? I do not have that. Okay, great. Come up together, that will expedite our conversation. So Kent Ziegler and Christine Kozinski. Your name is first, Kent. Your name is listed first, yes. In the order in which we have them.
My name is Kent Ziegler, and I live in unincorporated Clackamas County. I'm so happy to be here. 8 years ago, we started this process. Eight years ago. In fact, Commissioner Neely was on the City Council at the time as we started the sessions and meetings with the Metro councilors to try to determine what areas throughout the Portland metropolitan region would be added into the urban growth boundary. At that time, we had numerous public hearings, numerous comments that were put into the record, and this was an area that was identified unanimously, if I remember correctly, by the City Council at that time to come into the city. And that was 8 years ago. Here we are today, and as our planner, Kirsten, I think, pointed out very succinctly and very clearly, taking one more step in that long-term process of working with the city, working with staff, to eventually bring some finished product online to create jobs for this community. Now you ask, Ziegler, why are you here? Don't you know the economy is going downhill and we're having a tough time? Well, as many of you already know, my brother and I grew up in Oregon City. We attended Mount Pleasant Grade School, attended Gardner Junior High, graduated from Oregon City High School. I've spent over 50 years of my life in Clackamas County. I have a passion for this city. My mother was city recorder for Oregon City, and I'm not going to give up. I'm not going to give up. I believe in this city. I have a true belief that I can contribute here, not only in Park Place, but elsewhere within the city. And I'm here to try to do my part to add jobs and put citizens back to work. Hopefully sooner rather than later, but the market will help dictate that. But then we have to keep the process going forward, and that's why we're here tonight. As Tony made very clear, we're not here to ask for any permits tonight. We're not asking for any development approvals tonight. We're only asking that approximately 53 acres be put on the ballot for the citizens of Oregon City to decide whether they want to add this land into the city at the county zoning, which would allow 5 more homes. It would have very little impact on the city right now, but it does allow that planning process to continue. We know we're going to be spending hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars in infrastructure to go ahead and create our vision for the Park Place area. We are not asking for any urban renewal money, none. We made that clear earlier. The Planning Commission was very passionate in their unanimous approval of sending this forward to you, that they felt tremendous outreach had been done through the city in getting the concept plan adopted. And I agree with them 100%. I attended over 30 of those meetings myself. So I think it's going to be that I really get to, but that's part of the process, and I look forward to continuing all those meetings. But the one thing that I know, through the other...
To your conclusion.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Hold on just a second. Was that timing for him? It was on the wrong person, so.
Thank you, I just need to clarify that, so.
How much longer does he have then?
I can speak fast. One of the things that we mentioned at the Planning Commission public hearing on the 8th, I believe it was the need to possibly look at a secondary access, not only to serve our concept plan area and the area that's being proposed for annexation, because right now there's only one way in and out, the Livesey Road, and there's been some very serious health and safety and loss of property incidents because of that. Livesey's been known to flood, and one of the other neighbors here is going to be giving testimony about his particular situation. But also the existing subdivisions that have already been built off of Holcomb have only one ingress and egress point. They're in Trail View, so if there ever was a fire or an emergency that required police or ambulance services, if Holcomb was blocked, they may not be able to get that needed service. And one of the things that our proposed annexation would provide is a very much needed secondary access. For the people in our community that we would be building, it would be via Holcomb. For the people off the Holcomb area, it would be off of Livesey. And eventually off of Redland when that's connected. And I've got a little board here I'm just going to quickly display that represents that a little more visibly.
You have a microphone, Kent. And those, I believe those boards could go on that railing over there, so that,
That'd be great.
and then you can come to the microphone and talk about them. Your time is up, so you'll need to summarize quickly what those are, and then we'll let those stay there.
Basically, the dark lines on the exhibit that's white shows the existing street pattern for the subdivisions that have already been built within the city limits of Oregon City. And the yellow is, as was pointed out earlier, is our proposed connections from those existing city streets, plus our new connection up to Holcomb, which then would allow us, Holly Lane is built, to have another access point for people to get into those communities. Eventually, Holly would go down below. The only reason I point that out on the bottom is a picture of when Tammy Kehoe's house flooded last January and Redland Road was closed, I believe, for 3 days down where Livesey was, so people couldn't get into their homes. It's something that happens more often than not. And so you just need to be aware of that.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Christine.
Jane Kaczynski, unincorporated Clackamas County. In 2008, annexation was sought for 84 acres in Park Place, but it was voted down after the concept plan approval. Now the city again seeks to annex 53 acres. Has anything changed since the last annexation? A regional transportation plan has not been developed. Development is still not paying its way. Even though SDCs have been raised, they will not apply to this development. Lack of roads and financing of in this corridor have not been addressed. The efficacy for the Swan Road extension remains unknown since geotechnical studies have not been done. The upcoming May ballot measure will seek only to annex 53 acres. However, I directed to a letter dated January 25th, 2010, from Planning and Land Design, LLC, in which the applicant clearly states that development for the first phase can begin in summer of this year, 2010.
We have that letter in the record.
I believe, I'll have to look through real quick.
There's no question about evidence. This is not from the
Pardon me.
planning commission.
Sorry about that.
Would you like me to drop you a copy out tomorrow?
If we don't have it, but back up again because I distracted you. So start back where you were mentioning the letter, please. Sure, please.
The upcoming May ballot measure will seek only to annex 53 acres. However, I directed to a letter dated January 25th, 2010 from Planning and Land Design, LLC, in which the applicant clearly states that development for the first phase can begin in summer of this year, 2010. If intentions for this annexation are to rezone, build, and develop beginning this summer, then the ballot measure should address the cost of infrastructure, the ability of the city to service the homes, the financing for the new water system on Frank Road. An additional transportation plan must be developed for this corridor. If the River Shopping Center is approved, huge amounts of traffic will use the Redland Road corridor and its few connector roads, which already are failing or close to failing. The cumulative vehicles per day in this area must be assessed. Costs for these roads will be a huge expense. Who will finance this? These citizens and taxpayers have a right to know full details before they vote and go to the ballot box. I want you to know, Holly Lane residents will not be held hostage due to the lack of appropriate transportation planning for the entire Redland Road corridor. We will not lose our community. And since it passes.
The next two speakers, please, George Thomas and Paul Edgar. Tom Bell and George Thomas.
I'm speaking on behalf of the Park Place Neighborhood Association as their representative. So I believe that's 10, isn't it?
It's 10 minutes. Mm-hmm. Ms. Jen.
I wanted to preface this.
Please introduce yourself.
I'm sorry. Tom Bell, Vice Chair of the Park Place Neighborhood Association, Chair of the Citizens Involvement Council. Before I started, I wanted to preface this. You mentioned that you had a document from Nancy Walters this evening. Do you intend to read that into the minutes at all tonight?
Right.
I was wondering if you read it in.
No.
Mainly because as chair of the CIC, this is a preface to my Park Place role. It's my role to impress upon the commission the importance of listening and sincerely considering the elected representatives of the neighborhood associations. In this case, I refer specifically to Park Place Neighborhood Chair Nancy Walters. And while she submitted that, obviously that's not going to be heard by the public tonight because only your eyes are seeing it at this point. So this is kind of an expansion of one part of hers. Also, before I go into all this, I wanted to kind of correct Kirsten's comments. I know she's from outer Washington County, but I want to correct the fact that annexation failed after the Park Place concept plan went into effect. That was already approved, and the voters still voted that down. And also the sign that she refers to on Holly Lane, the extension, only goes to Holcomb. Holly Lane's already existing. It only goes to Holcomb. It doesn't alleviate any traffic on 213. It has no connection to 213. It'll go up to Holcomb, and there's no connection to 213 after you go to Holcomb. So that's just a couple of corrections. Kim and I had several conversations over the past year and weeks, and I don't consider any of our comments from Park Place or myself to be confrontational to Kent or his plans. Rather, they're kind of critical concerns of our neighborhood association and homeowners association for livability through any future development that might take place.
We're not suggesting we are anti-annexation, only concerned with the proverbial chicken and the egg process. What should come first? We contend that infrastructure needs to be in place to avoid some serious traffic concerns. There has been much conversation about the need for the Holly Lane extension that would go north to the area up for annexation and how it would connect to Holcomb to provide another access for when Redland Road floods. In the original concept plan, a quiet winding road with a low speed limit as it was proposed may not happen. The issue keeps arising that occasionally Redland Road around Lidsey, and Holly Lane does get flooded. This extra Holly Lane extension has been offered as a solution for emergency vehicles, as you'll hear shortly, and other traffic to avoid a flooded Redland Road. The problem we as homeowners and neighborhoods are having is that if Redland Road is not fixed first and the elevation is raised to avoid those floods, this Holly Lane extension will become a detour for any and all traffic that traverses Redland Road from communities much further out, all the way from Estacada, Fisher Mills, Harbor. All those cars coming in Redland, if that's flooded, they're going to have to take this Holly Lane extension to go all the way up to Holcomb to come all the way down. So before all this gets fixed, Redland Road itself, the voters are going to say should be fixed because that's going to impact all that traffic coming in on Redland. Can you imagine the traffic that will needlessly detour up through our area and then again down Holcomb Boulevard? And that's going to clog that intersection at Holcomb and Redland that's already clogged. But again, if that area floods, that's going to be the problem. Kirsten had stated in one of the planning mission meetings that Redland Road fix is not a part of this annexation and should be addressed separately at a later date. We believe that the voters will clearly see this as a solution to the flooding on Redland Road. See that a solution to the flooding on Redland Road is definitely a critical consideration for this annexation request, and that it should be fixed before any development takes place. Additionally, without the Redland Road fixes and Holly Lane extension being constructed first, the homeowners in Trailview, which you see up here with Smithfield and Buffalo, we're in Trailview Heights, Wasco, and Pacific Homes, are concerned that without a northerly route from down on Redland and Lissy, that all construction trucks will come in the only entrance up there right above Smithfield. The only entrance into that whole area is right there on Winston Drive. It comes down through Smithfield and Buffalo. Their concern is that those stub streets, as Tony mentioned tonight, would be opened up into some natural extension of those roads. Even if they're only constructing 5 homes at this time, when you allow for heavy construction equipment, graders, cement trucks, and more to come directly through that residential area, they can't handle the noise, the congestion in the street damage that this kind of construction equipment will place on the residential neighborhood streets. There's a lot of children, there's school buses come through those streets, and boy, if there's not another way for those construction trucks to get to this new development, other than starting from down below and creating that road, we're going to have a mess in that whole neighborhood. So those are the traffic concerns that we are hoping that this commission will take into consideration. As we know, later on, the informed citizenship, the voters will most likely undoubtedly do. I did that in 6 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My name is George Thomas, and I live on Lidsey Road in Oregon City. And I just kind of want to take a few seconds here to talk about a few things that happened in the time that I've lived there, which is 39 years. I've been flooded in Lidsey Road for 8 days, 7 days at a time, been flooded out, same length of time. Returned home one time, and neighbor's home was burned to the ground because the fire truck couldn't get through the high water to put the fire out. And Lidsey Road's been a problem for quite some time, and there's a lot of older people live on Lidsey Road that need medical help, medical attention, and they get flooded in. It's very difficult. I've been flooded in one time, and when we had no power. 7 days, no power. Hard to watch TV with a candle. But anyway, we move on with it. My wife is totally crippled, disabled, and housebound, and she's diabetic. And when we get flooded in, I can't get out to get her medication. When I'm flooded out, it's actually better because I can get her medication. But you all know that we had a small flood here in January of 2009. It only lasted 2 days, thank God. On that second evening, at 11:45, I had a heart attack. And my daughter got me into the car and whacked to a van. And I was hoping we could get out if the water was down enough. When we reached Redland Road, the water wasn't all the way down. There was approximately 2.5, 3 foot of water. And we drove through it. And we got to the hospital okay, and they were able to stabilize me. And I often think back, what if that would have happened the night before? I couldn't have got out. I might not be here with you right now today. And I really would like to see another way out of the road. And I guess they had the water station that they're talking about, pump station, has been a little problem out through the years. I've been out of water 3 or 4 times a year for 2 or 3 days at a time, which is actually an improvement over the 70s. You probably won't believe this, but in the 70s, I was out of water for 6 months. 6 months we was out of water. We had to go rent room to shower and bathe and haul water for everything. We had another way out. It would have been nice. And I'd like to, I guess just in closing, I'd like to ask if each one of you lived on Liberty Road, wouldn't you want a nice, safe way out for you and your family? Thank you very much.
Paul Edgar? That's the final speaker I have. If you're intending to speak, please fill out a card. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor and City Commissioners. I'm Paul Edgar. I live in Oregon City. I'm the land use chair of the Geneva Neighborhood Association, and I track most of the land use considerations. We've talked about this in the past, and a lot of what the Park Place annexation and comprehensive plan implications are have a direct effect upon taxation. And as we look at a transportation systems plan and all of its implications, we can readily see that the extension of the road, Holly Lane down to Redland Road, is part of the plan. Part of the plan is to develop all of these lots and rezone all of these lots. And we really can't even make anything happen until that happens, because the bank requires it. You need the incremental lots, and you need all this stuff to happen. So we're really talking about not just 5 houses. We're talking about the comprehensive plan and the full incremental implications of all of it. And if we get down to where we create this nice bypass of all of Holcomb Road, the Holcomb Road in itself is at level of service F now for a major length of time. It does not meet today's needs, and so we can't even develop this out without really fully understanding the implications of the transportation plan. So if the transportation then links down to Redland Road, and that's really where it's heading. Redland Road in itself is a major environmental disaster zone when we start talking about trying to expand Redland Road. If we were looking at it, not only because it's a county road, it's mainly jurisdictional, but if we're looking at it to try to widen it out to 4 lanes from Holly Lane all the way to 213 through along Abernathy Creek, we could conceivably be talking, with all of the environmental implications, $500 million. I talk a little bit with our friends here. I would say if we'd all have an LID in place, something that would say they would be responsible, all of the comprehensive plan area. I've even talked to Tony about it. when in fact we look at this area and say, okay, how do we develop it, but without putting the burden on all of the rest of the taxpayers of Oregon City? Because a lot of low-income families, a lot of seniors, we couldn't take a $500 million hit. And that's really what the implications are of something like this. So without this really having a real plan around it, all of the pieces, just premature, without an idea around it. If we had that, and they were fully responsible for covering all of the future costs and implications, not a big deal. It's not my fault, it's not my problem. But the way it is right now, this could really hurt homeowners, taxpayers, and everybody in Oregon City. And with that, I can't support it. I hope that you find that you can support it if you believe in the senior citizens, the homeowners of Oregon City.
That's the final speaker, and the applicant has an opportunity for rebuttal.
Kirsten Van Loo. I have a document, and it's part of the public record. I know you guys have this, and you've seen it many, many times. It is figure 3-6, concept plan, street sizing map with proposed cross-section designations from the final concept plan for Park Place. What we see up in front of us is only a very small portion of the total Park Place concept plan mapping that was done. And because the entire concept plan is in the public record, I don't think we need to put this drawing up or talk about it at length. Very important for city commissioners to understand, this is a very, very small portion of the total Park Place concept plan lands. My clients don't control the entire Park Place concept plan acreage that's involved in your plan that was adopted. They only control a small portion of it. Therefore, they only have the methodology to request annexation for that land or a portion of the land which they control. I would agree 110% with both of the gentlemen who spoke tonight representing their neighborhood associations. I would agree 100%. Transportation systems and traffic engineering in Oregon City is a nightmare. At the Planning Commission hearing a week and a half ago, Tony spoke at length about all of the various methodologies, the analysis methodologies, the funding methodologies, the proportional cost-sharing methodologies, and the work that he does or he participates with the federal government, the state government, the county government, the various jurisdictional governments, and all of his citizens to try and manage and maintain an adequate, if not superior, at least an adequate transportation system for the residents of the city. This annexation, as an annexation on its own with no land use applications associated with it, has no impact on the transportation system because no development is associated with it. No homes will be built. There are 5 existing dwelling units that are on the property today. Those dwelling units, if the land is annexed, will go from being unincorporated Clackamas County to the city of Oregon City. No new homes can be built until a zoned comp plan amendment, zone change application is reviewed and approved with the associated transportation planning rule analysis, with the determination of what infrastructure needs to be built, with a methodology for that infrastructure to be built, and then ultimately one has to submit a development application for a subdivision or a partition, and that application also has to be approved. So today, or on the 18th of May, when this annexation application is approved by the voters, nothing will change. I agree completely. Traffic is a challenge. Traffic has been a challenge in the metropolitan Portland region over the last 20 years. As we continue to build a compact urban form, we will be continually challenged by traffic. It's a choice that we as Oregonians have made to have a compact urban form. We have to find a way to make that work, and the way to make that work is to implement the plans that we have. Use the work that's been done by our professionals to get the transportation systems in place. I know Tony can speak to funding of the infrastructure that's necessary in Oregon City far better than I, and I would encourage you to let him speak for a couple of minutes about the methodologies that he has worked to develop to improve some of the challenges you have. There is a TSP, Transportation Systems Plan, in place in Oregon City. I believe that every application that comes before a review body here has to be in compliance with that Transportation Systems Plan. I believe that this annexation application is in compliance today, and any future application would continue to have to be in compliance before it could be approved by your Planning Commission and/or your City Commission. And we need more north-south neighborhood connections. You can't solve all the problems that you have on Highway 213 and Redland Road, but the more interconnections we have between neighborhoods and neighbors, the more we can alleviate the need to travel on 213 for all of our intercity trips. Thank you. May I answer any of your questions?
Okay, thank you very much. With that, I will close the public hearing. And I assume that before we come back to deliberate, you would like a break. Okay, we will
come back to deliberate.
We will come back to prepared to deliberate. We'll have a 5-minute break. The meeting back to order, please. We've had 10 minutes. And this is an opportunity now to return to the annexation. Could you shut the doors, please? Thank you.
I apologize, I was detained by the police.
You want that out in the public session? Okay, we'll return now to the deliberations over the annexation request. This is an opportunity then for the commission to ask questions and then determine our direction. First speaker will be Commissioner Neely.
I gotta correct the record sort of Mr. Ziegler. He's right. At one point I voted for the area to be included in our urban growth boundary, then 2002. Then I voted against it, but the reason being is I wanted your area to be included, and I tried to separate that so I could vote for a piece. However, the majority of the commission wanted to include more than that area, and I voted against that. So I was not particularly consistent.
Now, back to tonight.
Don't tell me off yet.
Well,
he did.
But I didn't. So.
No. I'm looking at Nancy.
I actually am the one that.
I'm green.
You know, it doesn't matter what color you are, but you may speak.
Thank you. I was rather impressed in the presentations from the individual that actually lives on Lacey, that actually wanted the alternative access, and I thought that was an interesting comment. I share a lot of the concerns about what's going to happen in the future, and particularly the impact on Holly Lane. It's already been pointed out that Holly Lane at various junctures is at a failing or near failing mode, and that's not from people in these in this area. That's from people that are already using it. I do believe we have to have an alternative access between our areas in Oregon City. We essentially have two distinct communities, one being the Park Place community and one being the rest of the area where we can get access to the uptown area without having to use Highway 213. How this is going to occur, I don't know. I really have my doubts that Swan Road is going to be a good alternative route to go through. I don't think it can be built through. It's got a tremendous ravine in that way. And Holly Lane may be the major method of doing that. Clearly, a great deal has to be done to assure it. Whether we can do it without having higher density on the Holly Lane structure, I don't know, but it is an area that's going to have to come through, and I believe that we're going to be able to do that in the future. But as was pointed out, this is a request for annexation. It's not, it's not the zoning process, it's not the actual planning process. And sentiment at this point in the discussion is that I'm probably going to vote to send this annexation to the voters.
Next in line is our attorney, Mr. Wiseman.
Thank you, Mayor. Planning Manager, Mr. Kunkel, was trying to
add a couple more comments real quick.
So you put your thing on there to intervene for a staff person. This is an unusual request, but I will grant it.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Attorney, Mr. Conklin. Cecil doesn't want you to speak either.
I know. I was just going to point out that the comments referred to addressing the January 25th, 2000 letter, they are in the record. The applicant, consultant had prepared a document with an aggressive timeline and an alternative request that could be made. The Planning Commission forwarded their recommendation that you had before you tonight. That is all that is being proposed. Nothing else is being recommended for any development any sooner or any concurrent zoning of any properties at this time. I'd also like to point out that it's factually incorrect that SDCs will not apply to these properties, and they will apply. Any home that has a building permit after the full SDCs go in later within the next year will pay the full SDC fees.
And then they're updated as
new updated SDC fees. They've been adopted, they've been prorated, they will fully go into effect, and they will apply to this property. The TPR, we had some discussion about the rivers is going to come in and no one's going to count for those trips. When you do a transportation planning rule analysis upon the zone change, you have to look at all of the properties within the existing urban growth boundary, there's some reduction for market feasibility, but you assume all those a majority of those vacant properties are built within the next 20 years. And you need to account for all of those trips in your transportation review. That is why demonstrating TPR compliance is so difficult. So the rivers, or that site, whatever it may be, is assumed to develop in 20 years at a mixed-use downtown zoning designation. If someone comes in next week for a zone change, they have to assume that because that's what is in place today. So we don't ignore the existing infrastructure in zone properties that aren't built in Oregon City. They are accounted for. I'd like to also point out that Highway 213, Redland Road. We are a regional center. We're very important in this region. We're the county seat. But that also means we have certain impacts on us that are unproportional for the residents and developers of this city. Over 40% of the trips on 213 during the PM and AM peak hour trips do not stop or start in Oregon City. Yet the expectation is that the Oregon City developer in our regional center, where we want density and mixed use, is to pay for that full cost. There is an equity issue there that you need to seriously consider. Expecting a developer in Oregon City to shoulder the cost of the whole Clackamas County region will stop development here. We have gone with Ms. Krushauer and taken extraordinary steps to update our SDCs, especially on the state highway system, where we have identified projects and we have included 30% of those project costs in our SDC fees so that we have a local match when federal funds hopefully become available to address the state transportation system. The local government, us, Oregon City, is taking that step. Not the county and not the state. Redland Road. The only one with a plan for urbanization of Redland Road is Oregon City, through their concept planning process to make that a safer road. Now, it is very, very difficult to get those funds and those improvements put in before any development comes. So I would just point that out, that we need to remember that we are focusing in on these projects, and that the
tools that we have available to us to use are being utilized at this point. We are accounting for these projects. We are designating their costs, and they will be applied to the developments when they come in. So I believe that's all. Oh, and I would also like to point out concerning the Park Place Neighborhood Association comments, it is unfortunate that you received their comments tonight, the night of the hearing. The first night of the Planning Commission hearing, a continuance was approved. It was requested by staff because we received comments from CRW, but the Park Place Neighborhood Association representatives also requested a continuance for additional time to prepare comments and submit into the record. So the timeliness of those comments is difficult for staff to respond to, as well as the applicant respond to when they do come in this late, even though additional time was granted. Some of the rebuttal to some of the comments that you did here tonight. That was
While you're at the microphone, may I just ask you to review, unless you'd like Mr. Kavaisman to do it for you, Okay, thank you. To review, when a zone change comes in, what is looked at, and then the comment about contractor trucks coming into new properties, how do we handle that? Where is the proper, where citizen input, or where we deal with how that occurs to a neighborhood?
Question was what zone change?
Right. What's the process for zone change? What is required? What is included in that? And then secondly, there's that specific piece about the heavy equipment.
Zone change, what you're demonstrating with is compliance with our comprehensive plan, as well as demonstrating that the infrastructure is adequately sized or has enough capacity to accommodate the proposed zoning that is going to be put in place on that property. And once again, I go back to it's important for water, and it's important for sanitary sewer, and it's important for stormwater. But those can be addressed, usually with pipe sizing, pump station if necessary. Those are engineering questions that are financially still manageable. The big one is transportation. And when a zone change comes in, you need to look at when the application is, when those developments expected to come online, as well as 20 years out to show compliance with the transportation planning rule. And that also assumes significant build out of your existing vacant lands inside your urban growth boundary. Those trips created from those vacant lands are assumed to come online in the next 20 years, and we need to account for those. And when you account for those, you start to identify which intersections are going to start to fail, and then you have to figure out what the fix is for that and identify that fix. So it's a very in-depth process of looking at the impacts. I actually think this is probably a benefit to Oregon City to be able to segregate the annexation from the rezoning of the property. It lets you focus in on that actual rezoning. I honestly do think this is a benefit. In that process, application conference with the city, meeting with the affected neighborhood association, public notice of the property, newspaper, online, hearing at the planning commission, hearing at the city commission is how that public process works. And then concerning the construction, the tourist properties come in, they obviously have an alternative access that could come off Holcomb and not go through any of those local streets. Our engineering department, if it is required to get access to a property for development, they have agreements with the property owner developer concerning conditions of the existing condition of the roadway. It's monitored for impacts from large vehicles. We have construction requirements for cleaning off the mud, not dragging dirt through, street sweepers on the local streets. We have construction hours of when construction can occur. So we identify where access to the site can be taken, where it can't. But all of that happens when an actual development is proposed for actual partition.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Nocita.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have two points I want to discuss. The first is the police question. the criteria for approving the annexation and sending it to the voters includes certain policies in our comp plan. And in turn, the comp plan, or the concept plans here, are in the comp plan are supposed to comply with the goals. In Goal 11, statewide Goal 11, police facility, police protection is called out as an urban facility. In fact, it's the first one mentioned in the text of the goal. So there's some important called out in the goal itself. I have found in my reading of both the Beaver Creek concept plan and the Park Place concept plan that the issue of police, which is a land use question because of Goal 11, is really given short shrift. I think it's, I'm not really, I have some concerns about the staff report that I reviewed regarding this question, and I read up on my computer because I've never really gotten I want to direct people's attention to Goal 11.1, provision of public facilities.
In our record?
Yes, this is in the staff report.
In the staff report, so we can access it as well?
It's page 14 of the January 25th staff report. Or January 25th, 2010 Planning Commission packet, page 14. .1.1 says ensure adequate public funding for the following urban facilities and services if feasible. Subsection D says police protection. There's a finding at the bottom of the page. The last paragraph on page 14 says policies 11.1.3 and 11.1.4 encourage development on sites within the city where urban facilities and services are either already available or can be provided. This policy implies that lands that cannot be provided urban services should not be annexed. The proposed land in this annexation can be provided urban services with the possible exception of staff-limited police resources. Future development will definitely require further analysis of this service area. I'm not satisfied with that as a finding, and some folks may recall that one of the reasons I was inspired to run for city commission in the first place was because of a police protection incident by my house. It got me very attuned and attentive to the issue of Oregon City's chronic underfunding of police services in this community. Commissioner Smith and many of his friends and family during the campaign had educated me on the history of the fact that this community had grown for 2 decades in size while leaving its police department at the exact same size. I'm very happy with the progress that we've made in the past year on the police question and staffing. No one will admit that we are at the standard nationally where we should be yet. So the solution that's offered, and again, by our codes, it's supposed to be addressed at this point, is this agreement for a $3,500 per house charge for police protection. As Commissioner Smith pointed out earlier this evening on that question, that only goes to construction. At that point, any house after that issue is going to be yet another house, that is making demands on our understaffed police department. I can't in good conscience approve any annexation and recommend the voters vote on it when we as a community have not finished dealing with that staffing issue in our police department. So on that basis, it's kind of a deal breaker for me on this annexation question. The second point I'm going to make is as far as the vote last year, I think I agree with the comments that have been made. I mean, it is a question for the voters, but I think the voters did speak in 2008. And I don't think, enough has changed to send it to the voters again. I don't think, I mean, who knows how someone would vote on a small annexation, but I mean, the fact that we have this expectation of fulfilling the development throughout the whole Park Place concept plan, I just really do have to the conclusion that what we're doing here is taking the rejection of this annexation in 2008 and just chopping it up and doing it incrementally. And I don't think that respects the will of the voters in 2008. So, nothing further.
Really?
I haven't seen him for a while, but we have had, I believe, whether, I forget the exact terminology that the Marshall's delivers put on developments. Do we still do that?
Agreement yes, we do.
You do?
Yes, for a land use application.
And just to make, could you clearly state what this means? What the non-remonstrance waiver means?
The division comes in, and let's say it creates 10 lots. Approval for all those properties. I don't know exactly how the non-remonstrant works in terms of you can't disagree, but I'm not sure how it affects the vote. So the formation of a local improvement district, if there's a certain percentage that object to or remonstrate against the formation of the local improvement district, the city cannot go forward with it. So if we receive sufficient non-remonstrance agreements, then they basically, by signing that, they waive their right to object to the formation, and you receive sufficient, they can't object to that assessment.
Development, any residents that were there prior to that particular development, of course, can vote. But the ones that come in subsequent could not if
their objection cannot be counted against the required amount.
If in fact we felt certain of the infrastructure needs, future infrastructure needs could not be met by whatever we identify in terms of funding, and we feel that a local improvement district is a possibility, actually, it is possible to put those forward. Is that not correct? The new developments then would actually, their residents could not oppose so well, I think the local improvement district mechanism is possibly a mechanism by which we could fund infrastructural improvements within those districts. I think our police department was closed for 3 decades, including 1 decade where we had a moratorium on growth. I would mention that progress in the hiring of new police officers preceded 1 year ago, and that we were very fortunate to get a cost grant which applied 2 additional police officers, so I think we increased something by 7, but that was an ongoing process. That wasn't driven by any individual or a commissioner coming on. We've recognized that need for some time. I guess that's about the only other question I had, but you know if we ever implemented that non-remonstrance waiver on any development that's come forward?
I'm not aware of any LID that we've formed relying on non-remonstrance agreements since I've been there. We formed a few at the instigation of the property owners, but I don't think there is a reliance on non-remonstrance agreements.
If I could just go back to Commissioner Neceda's comments about the finding concerning police. What makes it a challenge when we're writing this and reviewing it is that there isn't a standard of 1.1 police officers per 1,000 population, or so there's no standard that we use. So we try and interpret, the number of police officers we have on the street is a policy decision of the city commission that we believe is trying to achieve that adequacy. It's a policy decision. The commission gets to decide what's adequate. There's nothing in the code, in the comp plan, that has a target or a requirement for officers per 1,000. So what's adequate? It's a leap for staff to make when we have officers that have been hired on in the last couple of years.
Yes, Nick. Okay. Couple of topics. First of all, in terms of traffic, I think that no one expects one development to take on the fix for all of 213. I agree with that. I mean, that's a broader problem, but there are other traffic problems that have concerns, especially from what we heard tonight from the neighborhoods. Those aren't the biggest issues that I have. However, I'm kind of shocked in a way by the lack of emergency access for so many, for citizens up in that particular area. And I guess I'm kind of surprised by the fact that nothing has been dealt with that prior to now. To me, regardless of what happens with this annexation, that is a problem that should have been fixed long ago or dealt with long ago. And I think it's unfortunate that it is so tied into this annexation, because I think it's a separate thing. And I mean, the fact that we have citizens that can't get help when there's a flood are precisely some of the concerns that we as commissioners have about adding to the city without being able to serve it. And obviously, because of the neglect that we have done in the past, we have situations like that. And so it kills me to hear that. That should not be happening. It needs to be fixed regardless of what happens with this annexation. But what I come back to again and again is police. And I have to say that, none of us live in this dream world where we think that the city's not going to grow. The city's going to grow. It's a regional center. We have to expand the city, and we need to. The question is when. And the answer is not yet. To me, I think we've come a long way in this year with the police department. To comment on Commissioner Neely's comment, which was a reply to Commissioner Nocita's comment, the commission, when me and Commissioner Nocita were elected, had a plan of adding one police officer a year. That would take 10 years to get to 10 police officers, which we were short at the time we were elected. So the question is, if we got to the level that we needed to 10 years from now for today, what do we do to make up that 10 years? So what will happen is now we have managed to hire 7 police officers. We're making huge progress on getting to what I feel is a level of service, and the question is, what is adequate? What is adequate? I feel that the community wasn't ready yet last year to say it's adequate. I don't now think that we're quite adequate. I think we're darn close. If this was a year from now, I think I might be saying, let's go forward. But I still have some reservations about adding property to the city when we really know, regardless of where we're at in terms of adequate police, we are still not serving the entire city that we have. with police service at an adequate level. And that was a debate that we've been having for quite some time. And I think we've heard pretty clear in the last year from citizens that we're not quite there. So that's really what I come down to. I think that within the next year, if we continue on this process that we're going through in the city and adding to the police force, that a year from now, maybe we will be ready to expand. So I most likely will vote no, but I will also say with that if this goes to the voters, it's in their hands, and I fully support whatever the voters of the city decide.
Commissioner West.
Last but not least, I'm going to copy. I was going to say Ginny Van Loo, but it's not Ginny. Sorry. Sorry. Copy her and on this one of her opening remarks on this annexation with the 53 acres is a small positive and incremental step in growing our city versus last year, a couple years ago, when we were putting 160, maybe 120 acres on at a time. That's kind of hard for citizens to grasp. This is very manageable and understandable. So another thing I like about this is the option for connections on, the pronunciation, Lizzie? Lizzie, ready? Okay, I really like that option. As far as the $3,500 in the police shortage, I'm really pleased in just this last, year or two that we've hired 7 police officers. But the $3,500, I believe, is over quite a few subdivisions that we've taken out. So we're paying for some of the remodeling on our police station, if I'm not correct, aren't I? So, I mean, that money counts and is used.
The money has gone to a fund. Exactly how much is in that fund right now, I'm not exactly sure. Part of the money for the remodel was set aside by in a previous budget to remodel City Hall prior to its move to this location, and that's the money we're using now to do that. And another thing also, we've hired, I believe, I remember from the mayor's speech yesterday, we've hired since 2003, we've hired 6 new officers, I believe.
6, okay, well,
level of 39.
In regards to the police, we get good staffing levels in many of our departments in this city, and Parks is one of them. City recorder's officers, many departments, so we can't use that, or I'm not willing to use that. Just that police aren't behind, everything is behind, and that's why we're working hard to get caught up. And as far as the voters have spoken, if we gave up every time that we got a no vote, we wouldn't have an annexation to the fire department. We wouldn't be part of a library district, and we probably wouldn't have a library for years to come. You can't give up just because somebody says no. You have to build your case and your rationale of why it's a needed item. And I think that this small 53-acre annexation piece makes sense for this step, and that the next steps, you get to drill down on all the individual concerns that were expressed in this room, and that they can be addressed at another level, and this is the right place to start for tonight.
You're Nacita? You're
Actually, I was just going to correct you. I have no choice over here. We're kind of throwing the bills off over here now.
Okay, so nobody is,
I was just going to point out a couple things real quick.
you should have a lot of minions running front line for you.
They just keep pressing the button and throwing it this way. The city doesn't actively go out and look for annexations. These are property owner, developer, citizen, people who want to be citizens. If you bring them forward and we process them, we review them against our code. And so I just want to be clear that we're not actively out there advocating. I completely sympathize with the property owners on Lizzie access. I would also just like to clarify that these properties are not in the city. They're not, our police department isn't responsible to respond to them. Design and construction of Livesey, but we are the only ones trying to address it with a concept plan that not only provides the funding, but also alternative access ways in and out of there to address some of these pre-existing, extremely difficult situations to try and handle. So I think that is important. I sympathize with the property owners. You know, this should probably be taken up with Clackamas County on upgrading their streets out there. It's the same issue on Holly Lane. The thing sidewalks going to be put on Holly Lane in my lifetime through the county is very unrealistic, but it is in our plan, and it is funded, and it is identified. And I think that was just two clarifications that the growth standard is night and day.
I guess what I would like to say is that as I looked at the criteria, the 7 that we need to meet, I think this property lines up really pretty well, and really quite a bit has changed since the last time we voted, which was a different piece of that concept plan. One thing that's changed is that we have many code updates, because one of the criteria is that we have to comply with code, and we've really done a rather stringent code update as a result of the adoption of the concept plan. And then when, yes, the concept plan was adopted, but just barely, when these properties went out to a vote the first time, and we hadn't really had an opportunity for, in the Pike Place area, they were probably pretty well known, but the rest of the community who wasn't involved in the hundreds and hundreds of hours of meetings really didn't, I think, understand or know what was planned in that area. And just to echo Tony, the emergency access, that if it were a part of the community, we could provide that. And our citizens deserve it, and we know that the county's not going to do that. We waited for the county in several different areas, and that's why we're considering actually Mule Creek Canyon as part of the community, so we can protect that resource, because the county doesn't have the ability to do that. I digress. But Commissioner Smith talked about the fact that we were darn close to providing adequate police service for the community, and because we're not approving a housing development, we're approving some property that actually, in the best case scenario, there's not going to be anything built in a year. We move awfully slowly. I can't imagine that we could do a zone change and public hearings and have anything on the ground after a vote, if it were a successful vote in May, by the end of the year, but I can't always see the future. But so that, and the other thing that I know that this police chief and chiefs before him have said, that in our newer areas, the areas that are of new houses, new differently designed streets, different lighting, that crime is often less in the newer areas of the community. So the emergency access piece alone is pretty compelling, but when I look at all of the 7 criteria, to me, they much has changed since the first vote, and I'm really pretty, I'm compelled to like the new system, because I think it gives voters and citizens more access to the projects as they come on the ground, and more flexibility for both we as a community in planning our future, as well as the developer in moving pieces around. If we can't offer an opportunity for voters to look at this piece of a concept plan that was so laboriously debated and contentiously looked at in all of its elements, and I think at the end, people were pretty satisfied with it. So we went really from here to a great deal of acceptance of it, and this is the first piece of that has a possibility again to go out to the voters. And I don't at this point see a reason not to send that forward, because again, I think it's a different day. Okay. I don't see anybody on the agenda here.
I,
You're hung up.
I'm-
Okay, you're next, Commissioner Neely.
Yeah. Comment on terms of propane. Person has a house that's worth, say, $300,000, and they resided in that house about 13 or 14 years ago. Their taxes were drawn back 2 years, and then they are only increased at 3% a year. If there's a new house that comes out worth $300,000, we're paying the full amount of tax at that particular point. My guess is that somebody that's lived in this city for about 18 or 14 years, with a comparable valued house of a new one that's coming in, is probably paying, the person coming in is probably paying 50% more on taxes than the person that's already there. So the notion that somehow the new people coming in are coming in on our back, I think is a little bit questionable. Until we hit this recession, the 3% didn't even meet, I don't think, cost of living needs, let alone anything else. The fact that we've been able to actually keep in the black to some degree, the fire annexation had a great deal to the good position that we're in, but the fact that we've been able to keep in the black for such a period of time has become because of new development coming in.
And Anita.
I actually wanted to make a response to, and maybe give a dissent to what I've been perceiving as kind of an emerging consensus on one issue about this annexation, that is the emergency access. I agree completely that the access should be improved. I don't know necessarily that either the annexation resolving the problem is dependent on annexation. I think it probably could be solved even in cooperation with the city without annexing the 53 acres that's being requested for annexation here. The other thing I'd say about the whole issue of safety and flooding, I would offer, as someone who spent part of his career as a watershed planner, that growth and annexation being part of growth actually will contribute to some degree, making flooding worse. Because when you build dense, impervious development, you interrupt the natural hydrological cycle of saturation into the groundwater system, and water runs off at the surface into the local streams and makes flooding worse. So that's documented historically. So I'm a little wary of the idea that reason to approve an annexation like this is to resolve a problem like the flooding and egress issues on Livesey Road, because I think those can be dealt with otherwise without annexation, and the type of growth that this annexation will lead to will create greater imperviousness and greater issues with flooding.
Thank you. That concludes the speakers. May I just have a test of with our attorney? So this would be we're asking for a preliminary a vote, and then you would return with findings if this were approved. How's this work?
Document that has already been created that is in your exhibits. So what we would ask you to do, unfortunately my computer is malfunctioning.
We're having trouble getting to, there, I got mine.
Yeah, and so
the resolution then?
And so what we'd ask you to do is, if the commission is inclined to approve this matter, that you would move to adopt resolution number 10-02 with the findings and reasons for decision, assuming they meet you agree
also
with those.
Includes the ballot title.
Yes,
so it includes the number of items.
Yeah. Yes, the ballot title as well.
Is someone ready to, submit a motion? Resolution, you're moving to approve resolution 1002?
Yes.
Moved by Commissioner Neely, seconded by Commissioner West. For further comments or questions? Nancy, the vote please.
No.
West? Aye. Commissioner Smith? Mayor Norris?
Motion passes 3-2.
Congratulations.
Okay, yes, several times probably. Okay, moving along then to the next one. We have a development agreement from 2007, an amendment, oops, my computer just switched. A 2007 development agreement with Modena Homes. What? Yeah, Okay, does everybody have, can everyone call this up? No, you can't button it? Is there anybody Mine. Mine's coming.
No, it doesn't work. I need to.
I haven't opened it up yet. Okay, Tony, is this is, we're voting for an ordinance with an amendment, and Tony, are you presenting the staff report? Thank you. Please begin.
We'll be presenting the staff report. We're recommending the first reading of ordinance number 10-1002, which amends a pre-existing 2007 development agreement between the City of Oregon City and Modena Homes. What has happened is Modena Homes project was bought out by Columbia River Bank, which then has, since we started this process, become Columbia State Bank. We are proposing, this development agreement addresses some street improvements that are identified in the transportation system plan at Partlow and South End Road. It's a realignment of an intersection there. This is a 9-lot subdivision, kind of what we were discussing earlier concerning the proportionality of getting an exaction. The subdivision was relatively small, so we've entered into a developer's agreement to reimburse them for some of the oversizing of the property acquisition, the piping in the road, and the pavement width. But what we're actually proposing to amend is that we, in paragraph 9 of the agreement, we're extending the duration to January 1st of 2015, becoming retroactively effective January 1st of this year. In paragraph 12, this amendment extends the time permitted to construct the public improvements associated with the subdivision to the January 1, 2015 date. And then we've removed some contradiction in language. Paragraph 18 is deleted. To clarify that this agreement may be assignable if there are any future I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
I'm not sure everyone has it up, but so essentially 3 changes to paragraph 9, 12, and 18. Okay, questions from the Commission. Commissioner Neely.
Changed, the timeline, for the most part, is being changed, and this really accommodates that. Is that correct?
The project is the same, the improvements are the same, just the ownership has changed in the timing because of the transfer of ownership via bankruptcy.
I'm just curious about the funds that the city would contribute for the oversizing. Would they be coming from SEC?
That they are coming from system development charges for the oversight.
Lisa Nancy Kershaw was heavily involved in this and be able to answer, but I'm pretty sure it's SEC's.
It's over here, so I guess, yes, please, Commissioner West.
I would like to move approval for the first reading of ordinance number 10-1002, amending the 2000 development agreement between the City of Oregon City and Modena Homes.
Moved by Commissioner West, seconded by Commissioner Smith.
Before you do that,
You have to have
we've got to have a public hearing.
So, Mary Ann, you withdraw your motions.
I withdraw it.
Thank
I
you.
stand corrected.
In the public hearing, I think we were looking at the, yeah, we ought to go.
4.5 hours.
We never want to shut out the public, so, has anyone come prepared to speak to this evening? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing.
Reinstate my motion.
Commissioner West,
I have to say it again? I gotta find it now.
probably.
I move for approval of the first reading of ordinance number 10-1002, amending the 2000 development agreement between the City of Oregon City and Medina Harbor.
Moved by Commissioner West again, and seconded by Commissioner Smith again. No further discussion. We need to have for the first reading, this is an ordinance, correct? So, Mr. Kleisman.
Statute requires development agreements to be adopted by ordinance. Ordinance number 10-1002, an ordinance amending the development agreement for 19038 South End Road pursuant to RS 94.504 to 94.528.
Thank you. Now, Nancy, the vote, please.
Commissioner Nocita?
Aye.
Commissioner Neely? Commissioner West? Aye. Commissioner Smith? Aye. Mayor Norris?
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. Next, we have the Oregon City Code Amendments, the 6-month update. Has been.
Madam Mayor, you might want to move the next two items up ahead. You do have people here for those, for the general business section, and we can come back to this if you'd like to. I don't know if anybody's here for the code updates. I know it's,
I don't see, we do have one member of the police department and some others, so we'll take then, the first item, and thank you for that. First item under general business, which is to, look at the collective bargaining agreement that made national news. I believe that it was determined that, the quickest settlement of a police contract in history or something, that we're going to look at this agreement that is between Oregon City Police and Police Association and the city. So, are you doing this, Chief?
Yeah, ma'am.
Okay, great.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and City Commissioners. I'm really pleased to have the staff recommend the City Commission approve the proposed collective bargaining agreement between the City of Oregon City police officers and Oregon City Police Employees Association for the period of July 1st, 2010, June 30th, 2013. The following terms were already negotiated and ratified by OCPEA members earlier this month. Basically, it's a 3-year contract which calls for a 2% increase in COLA over the next 3 years. There's a little bit of salary change in the sergeant's range. Basically, the sergeants were facing a compression issue, and what we did then is remove the low step of the sergeant's range and added a top step to make that a little bit more equitable for them. We modified the vacation accrual to be consistent with ASME guidelines, and increased the allowance, and took away, substituted the legal defense fund language for the PORAC, which is basically an insurance system that pays for defense of police officers when they're involved in issues that might take them before a grand jury, such as an officer-involved shooting or things like that, or if they're sued civilly. It provides a defense fund for them. And there's some other basic language that was cleaned up, such as clarifying how overtime shifts forbid with sergeants and officers and things like that. But I think that's pretty much it. The changes. It was a pretty simple process, as we said. It was done in just a little over a day, and 6 weeks ahead of schedule, which is unheard of in this business. So
that's really pretty outstanding.
And I'm not sure if one of the Mike Kramer from he's the president of OCPEA. I think you might want to say something.
Glad to be here. Please come to Mike.
Mike Kramer with the Oregon City Police Employees Association, President. I'll thank you for your time, Mayor Norris, Commissioners. I'll make it really, really brief. It was just a good working relationship. What you have before you tonight is kind of the results of kind of a collaborative effort between the association and the city, and I think everyone's really happy with it. And it kind of shows the good working relationship that we have with Chief Conrad and the other employees within the city, and I think it's good for the city, citizens of the city. Everybody in the association voted virtually unanimously to approve it. Actually, everybody that was there voted unanimously to approve it. So I would certainly encourage the commission to approve it tonight.
Thank you very much. Other questions?
I'd also like to point out that I think Mr. Lofter, for his participation on the management team, provides some really good guidance and was a really good conduit between us and the association. So I'd like to thank him also.
Thank you. Who's taking credit for the one-day settlement? Is that you, Jim?
Does it matter?
No. There's always a hero. All right, we have a motion, please. Okay, Commissioner Neely.
If we vote against it, do we get to meet the national news again?
Bad joke, bad joke. While you have the mic, would you like to,
with guns in the back of the room.
I told you I was detained by them, that's why I didn't get any here in time.
Good clarification, we were concerned.
I like your
I think it's 12.
2 years.
Incorrect on here. Oh, yeah, I was looking at the wrong spot. Thank you. Yeah, it is written incorrectly on one place, but that's okay. Who's seconded? I'm sorry. Okay, moved by Commissioner Neely, seconded by Commissioner Smith. Is there further comment or discussion? Seeing none, Mayor, for the vote, please.
Commissioner Nocita?
Aye.
Commissioner Neely?
Aye.
Commissioner West? Commissioner Smith? Mayor Norris?
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. Thank you very much. That's good work. Okay, next we have another, if we can get back to the agenda here. Another item of general business, and that is to talk about a request from the farmers market for $35,000 from the business license fund to. I'm sorry, the screen just scrolled up, so I can't get back down to the. $35,000 request to create a 2-day week downtown farmers market, and additional $15,000 and 5 for subsequent years, but we'll get to that in the discussion. For the staff report, Mr. Patterson.
Members of the commission, also I have a little bit of new information this evening, so if you approve this request, you'll need to make it contingent upon a approval of a conditional use. It's my understanding that if you have a farmer's market that is going to be in downtown that begins before 6 p.m. or not on weekends, it requires a conditional use, so that'll be an application we'll have to work with.
Is that a cost issue?
There'll be a cost associated with that, of course, unless you want to direct us otherwise. Well, but with that in mind, you do have a request, and it's actually a request for seed money for 3 years. The first year the request is for $35,000, and I'm recommending to you, if you're going to do that, and we're going to try to get this up and going before May, is you'll need to fund that, and you really only have one of two sources if you're going to do it, or make that commitment this evening, and that would be the business license, or you go to general fund. I'd be recommending you take that out of the business license. The second year, the request is for $15,000, which is in 2011, and then the third year is $5,000 in 2012. And again, if you want to go forward that, you could determine at a later date to where those funds would come from, and those could possibly be grant funding as well. A farmers market in downtown core has been a desire of the Main Street group. You've had conversations, you've heard those conversations. Mr. Purdy's here this evening. I think he could kind of share with you their sentiments on that. There was also 2 markets held this last winter. Both of those were very successful, even though it was somewhat chilly out there, having attended both of them. The market, as I indicated, do need seed money to get it started. They feel it's important to get this started and for it to get recognized prior to the bridge closure, and I think everyone kind of sees the importance of that. You have the details of what they're proposing in terms of number of markets. As I recall, I think it's 38 through the course of the entire year, 26 of those coming in the late spring and summer. So, again, that's kind of the overview of that. You have representatives here who can answer questions in regards to anything you may have in regards to farmers market. It's really a question of whether you're interested in putting forth this seed money.
Colleagues, may we call Jackie Hammond-Williams, the director, to, I think it would be appropriate for, since it's a request from the farmers market. So please come forward, Jackie. Thank you. Yes, of course.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and Commissioners. I'm before you tonight. It's been a long road. I've been talking to many city leaders and downtown business people for several years now, since the beginning of the 6-year market. It'll be going into its 6th year up on the Hill. So we've been quoted for many years by different people to have a presence on Main Street. We began talks last year in earnest with the Main Street program's representatives, Don Slack, Lloyd Purdy, Daphne West, Commissioner West. So we kind of jumped in the winter and we did 2 markets, and they were a success. And the weather was chilly, yes, but the rain wasn't too bad, and everyone was very happy. I'm here not necessarily to tell you the benefits of farmers markets. I think there's enough of that in the news. In fact, I was excited when you read your letter from Michelle Obama, because I was convinced she was going to talk about the farmers market, but she didn't. I'll forgive her. Anyway, I'm here tonight really to talk about the urgency that I feel if we're going to do this, and I think there's a lot of people in the city that would like us to do this. Certainly our vendors loved it, and the customers did too that came down. I think there's an urgency to get it up and running this year because of the bridge closure. And also there's an urgency to secure funds early in the season, because if we're going to launch this, I need to be able to talk to farmers and vendors. And they need to plan, they need to sow their crops, and otherwise I would have gone out and applied for a grant that would have been hopefully available in July, but that's kind of a little after we should be up and running. So that's why I'm here tonight. I have full support from all the adjacent business owners. I have letters in front of you tonight from the Main Street Project, also from Verdict Bar and Grill, the Caulfield House, and Bush's Home Furnishings. I talked also to the lady who owns the Living Room Pub building, which is the other side of the market site, and she is so in favour that she actually is going to fill out an application and wants to become a vendor in the market. So I think we kind of secured the approval of all the adjacent business owners. I know there was some concern about that from some people as to whether they would be in approval. So I'm here really, I could go on about the benefits of a farmers market, how it can be a catalyst and attract young businesses, food businesses to downtown. I think having a vibrant market downtown will be a source of energy for this downtown area to revitalize it. We're planning on 26 summer Wednesday markets, which will be in the evenings or afternoons, starting 3, going through till 7. The prime customer for that market is the people who are already working downtown, the McGrath neighborhood who can walk to it, and also to attract commuters coming down 99 going home in the evenings. And then the other 12 markets are planned for every other week of the winter on a Saturday. So we would finish the Saturday market up on the Hill at the end of October, and we would move it down onto Main Street for the duration of the winter and into the spring every other week. So that's a total of 38 events. I
think that gives us, and my math isn't good and it's late, but I think it gives us something like 68 market events within the city, which is huge. And I think our community will support it. We have the numbers now, we have the critical mass of people within the city. We are directing these different markets to different customer bases, so I don't think there's any trouble with kind of cannibalizing markets. I think they appeal to different groups. So I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
I could. You don't need to convince me of the benefits of the farmers market. I just think it's terrific. I'm so pleased you pulled it together here. I see that we have labor costs. So could you explain that? It appears that actually may be a way to ensure its success. Then I think you answered my questions about if we use the business fund, then it's supposed to be a stimulus to business, and you have the support of those around you. I guess more people downtown. Obviously, we're supposed to spend their money in multiple places. And then, because there are 2 grant programs for which you don't qualify for this seed money, however, you do qualify for possible application for the, I didn't realize that the other part was winter. And I would encourage you for either that or multiple, or in the years out, to try to secure funding from there. But anyway, if you could again talk about those items just a little bit more.
Okay, yes, you will see there's a labor cost main stable market, which in fact is what we're doing. We've already got one successful one up on the hill. We're not seeking funds for that. That is in its 6th year and it's sustainable now. We're really proud of that. We've worked hard to get to that point. But starting one market is labor intensive. You have to work very closely with the vendors and the food growers. So a lot of time is involved, a lot of travel, believe it or not, because we believe in visiting the sites of our farmers to check that what they're doing is copacetic with what our mission is of the market with sustainable agriculture. So that, you know, every viable, strong organization has to have good management. And so obviously there's a chunk of the money in there that will go for good, strong management. What was the other question about?
I shall redirect the question. Is there, because I don't know, a possible overkill, oversaturation of a market? Now, this essentially is, well, I guess it's 2 markets a week, and then one in the winter. So that question probably isn't valid, but
Yeah.
it speaks to how other communities do that, and so is this consistent with the population this serves?
Well, yes, as I explained just now, the Saturday one really is a destination market. People go to it. It's kind of out of the way. It's on the county parking lot. We built it, we branded it. It is now successful, but that will mainly serve particularly the developments in the south end of town. We get around 2,200 there May and June. It goes down a little bit to around 2,000, a little bit under in August. But most of these are families, lots of young children, and people certainly who live in the middle part of the city or the south end of the city. The Wednesday market will be really targeting those who work downtown, the McLaughlin neighborhood, who can walk there and use our wonderful elevator, and also will attract people into the community from neighboring communities such as Canby, Gladstone, and particularly West Lynn, which is why I feel it's crucial to get it going this year while the bridge is open, so we can show people who live in West Lynn and out of the community what we have going on in Oregon City.
Other questions? Get to my little list here. Commissioner Neely.
Questions on the timing and how it would impact parking.
Obviously, it's going to remove some parking from city use if we're going to close off 8th Street. I did have a great talk at length with Andy Bush, who would be impacted, I would believe, quite severely by that because he's the biggest business owner down there. And he was quite adamant that he was not worried at all, and you can, hopefully talk to him and verify this conversation, but he was not worried at all by the parking that would be removed. He thinks it would be such a plus, and I hope that other business people would also mirror his thoughts. It would be such a plus for the community down there that it wouldn't worry him if it did eradicate some of the parking downtown. No, just between
Getting the verdict and getting support from them, but you have support from all the property owners that are actually adjacent to the area
Yeah.
where you're going to have the farmers market.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I do.
Yes. I can ask Jackie a couple of questions. To get this started, what is the timeline again? I know you've spoken to it, but just remind me for my.
In an ideal world, we'd be working on it right now. It's very crucial that I get the word out if we're going to launch this year. As I said, crops need to go in the ground this month. They start planting late this month and into March, and so farmers need to have a little bit of lead time to plan that. Also, other food vendors, obviously have business decisions to make, how to ramp up quantities. Plus, I will be reaching out into the metro area and attracting new vendors and new farmers, and so I need time to get word out for that. So it is very crucial that, this seed money, if it's going to be granted, comes quickly so that we can get this going.
I'm on a springboard to maybe asking staff generally and fellow commissioners about this. Reviewing this proposal, I'm really favorably predisposed towards it. I've been to the downtown markets that have happened already. I really am sympathetic to the fact that the bridge is closing, and I've spoken myself about the need to have some really good supportive activities downtown to support downtown when the bridge renovation occurs. I guess where we're having a little trouble is maybe with our own processes as a commission. I was thrown off balance a little bit by the kind of rapidity with which this proposal has arisen. I've been criticized, and others on the commission have been criticized for introducing stuff all of a sudden, on the same night kind of thing. We have not had the benefit of a work session on this, and we've Commissioner Smith and I were talking about this before the meeting tonight, and multiple groups have come to us. The chamber has come to us, with requests. The folks at the Masonic Lodge have come to us with requests. For the most part, we've turned them down, and I feel kind of off balance at the rapidity of this request with an instant recommendation from the staff to approve this. And I need some help with some background on how we've also had discussions, with our spreadsheets on, the business license fund, on other demands on it, and now this seems to fit seamlessly into the spreadsheet where, I've seen that spreadsheet in other iterations where things haven't looked so rosy. I'm confused, and I just want to get some help on understanding how this has come to be.
I could respond first.
Sure.
I had the same response when the city manager called and said he wanted to add something to the agenda, because I said it's not been to a work session. The request has to come to a work session, and then the response is though that if this project is to be, if the seed money is to happen this year, it has to happen in this time frame. And so, so it is what it is. It's a request that's come without a work session because of a timing issue, and I think like any other request, we have the opportunity to debate it and give direction as we should. So yes, it is not quite within how we like our policies and procedures to work.
I could respond a little bit to that as well. Again, it's a much different process administratively than with a city commission. Definitely, when something comes to the administration, we have time to take a look at it, kind of put thoughts, and bring a recommendation to you. That's a little different than a board would work, but that's kind of the beauty of the different dynamics we have with a council manager forum. However, commission does not have to act on it. And I did explain when we had this conversation that normal in a process like this, we usually go to a work session, bring it forward, but because of the timing, I had, again, one or two options. I could say, well, instead of go that, and you missed the opportunity, or at least I could lay it on your plate and you could determine what you want to. In regards to the spreadsheet, yes, this is different, because at our retreat, you clarified this. So some of those things that were really drawing this down came out, as well as you will see, this draws it down because you are spending the reserve, but it ends. This is not an ongoing commitment. It's a 3-year commitment after that, and you can see where the fund begins to kind of stabilize towards the end of that. So, again, if there was other things you want to throw in that, I might have a different recommendation for you, but that's looking at
I can return to Jackie. Would it break your request if we continue this to our very next, because we don't have another work session, but I would like, if at all possible, I would like to have an intervening meeting, first meeting in March, so I can ask my questions and have chats with people, most significantly yourself, for example, on, this issue. And I just don't know what kind of urgency you're under, what kind of pressure you're under, and whether you can manage giving us the institutional, breathing space of another 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks before our first commission meeting in March.
Of course, I'll do whatever, you suggest. It is, I apologize for this, sort of onslaught, kind of sudden. It started with a process of talking to city leaders and the Main Street program, and then I kind of moved into some conversations, and then I met with manager Larry Patterson, and then he suggested we do this. So it's kind of, I'm new to this. I haven't done this kind of thing before. I'm trying to do the right, within the right process. But all that be said, it is kind of crucial because, as I said, we've got to alert the growers, the farmers. Every day that ticks on by, other markets snatch up vendors, farmers sign up with us. I haven't sent out a press release, so no farmer or vendor yet knows that this is in the works, except for the few that I've had the private conversations with who are in the market already. So, that it's crucial in that respect because we could miss out on some really good farmers and vendors. And I would like to stress that this is just seed money, it's startup money. I want to do it correctly, successfully, off the get-go, so I'm no longer coming to you over a period of years with my hand out. I want to make this viable, sustainable from the get-go. And the $15,000 is in there for the following year, but that certainly I could apply for grants. I'm not seeking that as a that would be, I would be willing very much to go through the grant process for that. And the $5,000 the third year may not even be necessary. And the 15 next year may not be necessary. Maybe it would only be 10 or 8. This is all a guesstimate, and I'm very cautious, in my figures. So.
Okay, Commissioner Smith.
Couple different comments. First of all, I was thinking 6 years. That's amazing. And the next thing I was going to say was, I was thinking I was going to say this is the best event in the city, and then it occurred to me that I plan a few events in the city. And plans a few events in the city, and etc. It's really the best. It's the market in the city, that's right. So, I find myself in a dilemma on a lot of things too. I have been really concerned about our constant use of the business license fund for just a random slush fund for anything in this city that anyone can imagine. And that concerns me, but I appreciate your comments about the business support downtown. And actually, from what you stated tonight, made that question a little easier for me. Because I could see how you were explaining how this really does tie into business and bringing business downtown. But the business owners are downtown are only a small percentage that pay that business license fee. So, yes, it's awesome that the downtown supports. The question is, does all the businesses and organizations support it and see, you know, if their money is going to pay this? I mean, that's their business license fund. So I still have a little hesitation about the business license fund and the way that we as a commission use that. And I think that's our problem. Like a lot of other different scenarios in the city, we don't necessarily have a vision, a clear vision of what that money's for. And to me, it should be for economic development kinds of things. It should be to bring in new businesses into Oregon City, or incentives to bring new businesses or start new businesses in Oregon City. But this business license fund at this point has been kind of used as, oh, well, there's some money there, let's use it for this. So I'm still concerned about that as a process for our commission. The process beyond that is also still of a concern. Our city manager just mentioned that you know, staff has the time to more time than we do when it's brought to us right away to evaluate it and to make a recommendation. But that's what happened with the downtown vendor cart program, and things got overlooked. And you know, the downtown vendor cart program was fully supported by downtown, fully supported by, well, I should say fully. It was. When it started, when it first looked at the minutes, it was, when it was presented at first by staff, it was told to us that it had been, there had been a process there. So, but what happened to be overlooked was the fact that it was against our ordinances to do that. And I was kind of surprised by the fact that our city manager said, oh, by the way, this is going to require a conditional use permit, which wasn't presented to us. And so that was something that was completely overlooked by staff. And throws a huge question to us. So it's not just, and so that's something that I would have hated to find out about after we said, hey, let's spend $35,000 on this, and then realize that, oh, we didn't go through the process. We aren't following our own rules, which is exactly what happened with the vendor card program. So the other question is, I don't want to see us as a commission make decisions on funding for the future out of Oregon City Civic Improvement Trust funds or Metro Enhancement funds, because that has to be looked at by that commission. Now, we're the majority of that.
Yeah. No.
I know, but that's what's, I mean, it's been presented to us.
I think it's presented to her as an option that because we do that all the time.
She said that they would look forward in the future.
Right. And so, I mean, it is, you know, that needs to come through, you know, that process and weighed with all the other projects in the city. And, you know, it very well might come out on top because it is an amazing event. So I guess those are my thoughts on it. I kind of feel the same way that we need some more discussion on that, but the timeline is at hand too, and I hate to make a precedent for any event in the city to come directly to the commission to ask for $35,000. You know, we have the grant set up for those types of uses, and it is a process, and as an event planner, we have to make that hard decision. Well, do we have enough resources to do it this year, or does it have to wait till next year? And to be quite honest with you, the bridge may still reopen. I hope to God not. I'd like to see the bridge project underway, but it keeps getting pushed through. So I don't think that I feel confident about making it. There's just a decision on it either tonight.
Mr. West.
I can certainly understand your feelings on not having a work session, but I can see both sides of a work session and further discussions of this and how it feels sprung upon you. But the whole thing just snowballed. The winter market was Thanksgiving and Christmas. Boom. That was December 20th, and it's February 15th now. So that didn't take too long. And the urgency at hand is, again, with the growers. So I just want to finish a few more points. So you can kind of see the urgency, but speaking to other requests that have come in front of us, for instance, the chamber when they wanted to move, I would like to think that we evaluate each request that has come in front of us and decided if it was a worthy thing. And at that point, we didn't feel that that was the right financial move for the chamber. And we do need to accommodate Mike's request if we can. What is the name of the boat? The Sternwheeler? Yes. So we were going to do our very best to help that boat stay in Oregon City, but then through some decisions that went from having anything to do with city government
costing us money.
Well,
it wasn't.
But we were still trying to accommodate and to keep a business and to for an economic development. So, I understand your concerns, but I just want to say a couple things in relation to economic development. If you think that as to the education or experience that I've had, or education and economic development, is that the segment of business growth that is growing is the small to mid-sized businesses, and if this isn't the perfect opportunity to be an incubator to grow them, I don't know what is. And 38 events for $35,000. When only a year ago we spent $22,000 for 3 parties downtown. 3 parties, and this year you get 38 events with music. So the value of it is, to me, is.
How did you roll on that other one? Because I want to know.
Well, I don't know. I think I had a vote. I think I did vote yes on that.
I think you did.
And another thing I want to testify to is that our entry program has really been marketing to the creative class. That's you saw the video and the blue collar creative. And through my experience working with Jackie Ann Williams in other roles and with other hats, if she doesn't qualify for the type of business and type of business manager that is the creative class, when I listen to her ideas of what will springboard off the farmer's market because of her creativity, I just don't know what would. So it's a perfect fit, I think, perfect for downtown. I'm hoping that my colleagues will support this and we can move on and understand the urgency for just this year, and then just we can't guarantee the second and third year funding. She'd have to go through the grant process as everybody else would and go up against the other proposals, but I think there's a good chance she'll be pretty successful down there this year. And
I'd like to invite 2 citizens who signed up to speak. If you'd come up together, please. Jackie, just get right back there because we want to get up after these.
Other people are speaking to this, and I haven't had a chance to, and I'm on the commission. You know I'm frozen up here, so you're not seeing my name.
Oh, okay.
I did that several times.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that your queue was still frozen. You want to speak in speak?
Well, every other commissioner has. The things I know here, first of all, is the $35,000 corresponds to an annual income that we're getting from the revenue stream of $35,000. There is, however, a large ending fund balance that has been extended. I'm hoping the Chamber can come up to speak because we haven't had any comments from the Chamber of Commerce, but I did speak to Amber Holbeck this morning, and although she knew the request was before us, I don't think she knew the amount that was there. 35 seems big, but when you go through the grant process on the antique fair, we have, and us, also in the Urban Renewal Agency, we have been funding up to $10,000 to $8,000 for the antique fair over several years, and that was a one-day event, and of course this is a several-week event, so this is different in that extent. But I guess I want to ask you a question. Do you pay a business license fee to the City of Oregon City?
We do.
Is that a single fee for the whole farmers market?
Yes.
Okay, and that's based upon the number of vendors that you have?
I believe so.
That alleviates one concern of mine. It's something that I would like to support as a large number, but my understanding is your expectation is not that we're going to approve anything beyond this particular year at this particular time, in spite of what we see on a spreadsheet.
Right.
Since I had
I call Tom Winter and Patty Jarrett to stand, please. Patty. Okay. Sorry, it took so long. I'm Patty Jarrett, and I'm an ardent supporter of farmers markets. And I think I'd like to say that, you know, the market, Uptown Market, has resisted the call downtown because there's a lot of startup costs. There's a lot of banners. There's just a lot of costs. And you mentioned the $35,000. It's basically Jackie's salary for doing all of those events. If you break that down by the number of events, it's minimal amount of money. And the other thing I'd like to say is that this is a service to downtown and to the citizens of Oregon City. That they're offering, you know, this wonderful, fresh, tasty food to meet the demands of people who want those kinds of things. And I think the major crunch we have is the fact that people need to, Friday really started last month, so people would have to catch up. And the other thing I think I'd like to say is that there's a lot of people moving into the local area, not just Oregon, the farming area close to Oregon City. A lot of young people are moving in. And many of these people we're finding at the farmers markets, they don't grow a lot of food, they're experimenting, they're learning. And this market could be a forum for those people. And it would help keep them on the land also, and help them. Jackie has demonstrated she's an incredible, passionate farmers market manager. I think she's the best in the state, and I don't think anyone would contest that. A lot of people I talked to at the winter market, I just wanted to explain this, is that we're used to the uptown market. So coming downtown was just a little iffy. What we found, it was really gritty. There's the train going by, there's the activities, there's the people, and people loved it. And I think there's going to be a lot of people at the market that will come to both. I'll come to both. I have a class in 6 weeks. I'll be downtown if it's here. I have my class on Saturdays. I really encourage you to consider this. It is a service that you can offer to people downtown and to farmers in the area. So that's about all I have to say. Thank you very much, Mr. Patterson.
Wanted to go back to the conditional use issue because there's something that has come up since we last talked. But there's two methods to deal with that. The cost is approximately $3,600, which we've done as all the additional costs. And so you have one or two options. You could tack it on here. That'd be probably if you wanted to pay. But you also have coming up on your agenda this evening the code amendments, and you could easily amend those code amendments to take that requirement out of them, and then you're not faced with those costs. For farmers markets downtown. That's a couple of thoughts.
Okay, thank you. All right, it's so if we could come to a conclusion or a motion, please. Commissioner Neely.
Well, you said something that struck me about, in fact, the possibility of the stimulus to additional people are entering the farm production to meet this particular market demand. we've sort of been able, not to the extent we wanted to, but hold the urban reserve piece, so it didn't extend very far into the Beaver Creek area. And many arguments we have heard at the Policy Advisory Committee to the Board of County Commissioners on keeping that out of an urban reserve has been that specific argument. We don't know that there are that much of the land is tied up in farm production to meet farmers market needs, but if it's a stimulus to that, I'd be more interested in it, because if Beaver Creek can, over a long period of time, show that it's going to provide that market, then I think there's a possibility that we can preserve that from not coming into an urban growth boundary. And so I see this as a possible mechanism of something that I generally support.
All right, are you ready for a motion, please? Commissioner Nocita.
I just noticed on the calendar we're in February, which only has 28 days, so our next regular meeting is only going to be in 2 weeks, not 3 as per usual. I can get over my anxiousness about setting a precedent on the rapidity of an approval like this. So I'm going to make a motion that we continue this to the March 3rd meeting.
A second. Moved by Commissioner Nocita, seconded by Commissioner Smith to move this to March the 3rd commission meeting. Discussion? Yes, Commissioner Neely.
I'm probably going to support the motion. Know that many of the spring cost fees and stuff that will be going in now. I think we need a couple more weeks. A minor request is probably, I think I would support the motion, but recognizing that might impact some of the opportunities for some of those farmers.
Yeah. Is there further comment? All right, Nancy, the vote, please.
Commissioner Nocita, Commissioner Neely, Commissioner West, Commissioner Smith, Mayor Norris.
My motion passes 4-1. Okay, we'll see you in 2 weeks. Thank you. Thank you. All right, back to, we skipped something, didn't we?
You might also want to pick up the next one as well, because you have folks here for that as well.
Looking for it here. I believe that this is the memo, this is the memo, the MOU, Memorandum of Understanding for the management of the Ertinger House. Just left again. Between the City of Oregon City and Marge and Rolla Harding. And who have curated the house for over 15 years. Staff report.
Mr. Mayor Norris and Commission, due to the late hour, I'll keep it brief and just ask any questions that you might have. We have, under the previous direction from the Commission, staff has been meeting with Marge and Rolla Harding for the past several weeks or a couple of months or so, and we have come to a mutual agreement here between the Hardings and staff, and that's resulted in the MOU that is in front of you. Just to hit the very, very high points, Mayor, as you said, the Hardings have been passionately volunteering for the city since, I think, 1995, and frankly, without their dedication, we would have the city would have a very difficult time to have operated the house, and as it is right now, even though we're having some parallel discussions to potentially give the house or do something different with the house in terms of the ownership. In this time period, we still need their assistance in operating the house, so they're willing to do that. Basically, this memorandum of understanding will just put the big points into writing and continue to do mostly what we've been doing through either written or verbal agreements for those past 15 or so years. A few different things that you need to be aware of that haven't been done in the past. The biggest of those is that we are providing the potential for up to $3,000 in reimbursable expenses. Those could be anything related to the house or the curation or involvement in heritage activities and so forth that are related to their association with the house. And also we will be calling them curators. In the past, we've just called them volunteer managers, and so that is a difference. But for the most part, it remains as it's been, and that's been a good working relationship that we've had. This MOU would go through the end of this calendar year, and then at such time, if it's prior to that we were to negotiate and work out an agreement with the NPS, this agreement would cease at that point. If we haven't done that and this agreement expires first, we do have the opportunity to renegotiate it or discuss an extension. So Mr. and Mrs. Harvey are here tonight. They've waited patiently. So if you have any questions for either myself or them, I think they're available as well.
Commissioner Smith.
1995, I was graduating from high school and started riding on the roller coaster, which is called the Ermitanger House, ever since. And there's two other people in the room that have kind of been on that journey. And I thanked them many, many times before for sticking with it and for not giving up. And when I would give up, they wouldn't. And when they would give up, I wouldn't. And so, Scott, I want to thank you too, and Denise for what seems to be maybe a last-minute resolution to get this really to happen. And I didn't want to see the city lose these crucial people who have, really taken care of that house for so long. So I want to thank staff, all the staff, for making that happen, and I feel that we're kind of on the, uphill side of the roller coaster again for another year. I'm happy to say that we're, I think, going in the right direction with the house, and feel fairly confident now in saying that it could still be there in the future when I drive by it. And so thank you everybody for the work and not giving up on it. And yes, I would.
I would appreciate it.
I move to authorize the city manager to execute this memorandum of understanding with the Hardings as volunteers to continue to operate the historic aspects of the Francis Ermitanger House, preserve the history of Oregon City relative to the historic aspects of the house, and to work towards a permanent solution to preserve the house itself.
Moved by Commissioner Smith, seconded by Commissioner Neely. Is there further comment or discussion? Nancy, the vote please.
Ms. Eden.
Aye.
Commissioner Neely. Aye. Commissioner West. Aye. Commissioner Smith. Aye. Mayor Norris.
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. Okay. Next item on the agenda is the end of the Oregon Trail request for a consultant that we've had a subcommittee review, and Lord Grady gave a report last meeting, which is attached, and made a recommendation for a consultant. So that's for us for adoption. Is there further questions or comments on that? Since it was introduced to you 2 weeks ago. Commissioner Neely.
We've requested Mr. Brady to speak to any questions that we have. Of course, we'll contribute to the conversation that I served on this particular selection.
Are there any questions or comments from this? We've had a good chance to determine it, and I believe that in addition to the request or to the recommendation is that also a committee be established to work with the successful vendor to refine the scope of work. So I have a motion then, please? Mr. Neely?
There was some on the computer. Most of the applications that we had directed their attention to, I don't know if I mentioned this in the previous meeting, directed their attention. Well, I won't do it again. Yes, I'll make the motion.
Okay. And second?
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Neely, seconded by Commissioner Smith. Seeing no further comment, Nancy, the vote, please.
Commissioner Neely, Commissioner West, Commissioner Smith, Mayor Norris.
Aye, motion passes 5-0. Who, shall we have the same committee work with this group? You're very familiar with it. Are you willing to continue? Yes, by staff. Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
That's an excellent staff support, let me mention that.
Thank you.
Jerry does a great job. Okay, moving on then to the consent agenda. Oh no, back to the code amendments. I believe that those are going to be, continued to March, what, 17th?
17th.
We have a motion for continuance, please. And a second. Moved by Commissioner Smith, seconded by Commissioner Neely for continuance. Nancy, the vote, please. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Thank you. Okay, now back into the consent agenda. We've removed one item from it, which was the minutes of which, was it?
February 3rd is.
Okay, so we have two items left. May I have a motion for approval of the consent agenda?
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner West, second by Commissioner Neely. Nancy, the vote, please.
Commissioner Nakita.
Aye.
Commissioner Neely. Commissioner West, Commissioner Smith, Mayor Norris.
Aye, motion passes 5-0. And then the minutes of February 3rd. What do you?
Oh, I wasn't at the meeting.
Approval. Moved by Commissioner West, second by Commissioner Neely. Nancy, vote.
Commissioner Nakita. Commissioner Neely. Commissioner West. Commissioner Smith. Mayor Norris.
Aye, motion passes 4-0 with one abstention. And then moving into communications, first is our city manager. I have nothing.
Oh my God.
I do have a question there.
Oh my goodness. Okay, Commissioner Neely.
Doesn't have a report, and we actually had asked him to respond to the request by Mr. That's terrible.
And
So what does he do?
anything?
Did I send you an email on that?
Request was
About the sidewalk, and Bashar has given me a report. I thought I forwarded that email on to you, but I'll look.
Need to re-forward it.
Just to make the request, however, the comments do come out publicly since the request is made public. So I'd try to save you some time.
Next time. All right, thank you. Do any commissioners have reports from the committees to which you have a liaison responsibility? Okay, Commissioner West. Exciting announcement, don't you?
By the way, I do relish Mr. Patterson's reports and comments. It's just 5.5 hours later. So I'm going to be really quick. I attended a C4 meeting a couple of weeks ago, and I was appointed to the executive committee on that group, and which was very exciting for me. And thank you. And I haven't been to C4 for a little bit this fall, but they've reconfigured kind of who they are. That group is kind of more active now. Instead of just doing city business, working with Clackamas Cities, that's what it's staff for, Clackamas Cities Coordinating Committee. Now they have just decided to add hamlets and villages, and CPOs have been in for a while. So the nature of our business is going to be much broader now. And I was a little more skeptical of it because it really is a whole different focus. But after listening to people in the Oak Lodge, Oak Grove area with their frustrations on growth, and then having the CPOs and hamlets from out in Eagle Creek and Beaver Creek, it's really, I'm looking forward to making it an opportunity for educating both sides of the city, because we usually just talk about city business, so it'll be really interesting to meld all our agendas from rural to urban. So that's one thing. The other thing that is very exciting, I'm trying to be exciting, 10:30 here, is American City and the Golden Neighborhood is specifically just won the 3rd annual contest from This Old House magazine. It's a TV show magazine. and they have an online website for best place to buy an old house. And so they've nominated 51 neighborhoods across the United States, but we got the one for the state of Oregon. And Nancy, can you pop the website up? We're going to pop it up. One of the fun things about it is they cross-reference it for all the attributes. So we are listed on this website for multiple things, for being a bargain to buy a house, for close to city life, because I made the case, or we were making the case in our application, that small town city life very close by. Great for families, great for first-time home buyers. We really did we had a realtor document a lot of housing prices in the area, and Oregon City is still a good buy compared to Portland. We have waterfront with our views of the Willamette and options for retirees to live. So we were going to get the website up. But the other thing that's been kind of fun about this is I was working with David Knoll today to get it on our city website. On our front page, how we have a revolving thing, and how we formatted our application was some of the photos were the 43 photos of our neighborhood, of different houses, churches, and the promenade. We put on Facebook, so because we wanted people to be able to look at them, and it's a public site on Facebook. So here's a first foray into the city of Oregon City, working with social media and commenting on applications. But so this is just the website from This Old House magazine, and out of the 43 photos they took, I think the address is 920 Center Street, my neighbor's house. So it's kind of interesting. But stay tuned and look for the city website, and it'll have the application on it that we made, and all the other photos. The magazine only just shows this one. And then I also want to thank everyone that contributed to that application, which was Christina Robertson Gardner and our staff. Our historical planner really helped, and Claire Met, Denise McGriff, Karen Peterson, and Terry Stewart. We're lucky, a realtor from Oregon Realty, but we're really lucky we have a realtor that specializes in old houses in our neighborhood. So,
thank you, Daphne, for your work and making sure this happened. Thank you.
I'm also admit to being a little concerned. She said this is a great buyer's market, but if I were going to do something, I'd sell one of these things because I've got one.
That's true. Okay, are there other reports? Okay, Commissioner Smith? Oh, sorry, I wasn't on that page.
Okay, I just wanted to mention that the play at the high school is coming up. It's the 25th, 26th, and 27th of February, and the 4th, 5th, 6th of March, and it's called Wordplay, student-directed one-acts or scenes in the Black Box Theater. So if you get a chance to go to that, I would highly recommend it.
Thank you, and we are adjourned.